Chapter 1496. Shio. The sharp sound of something tearing through the air reverberated throughout the entire space. Under Lancelot's gaze, 3 bolts of lightning shot towards him at lightning speed. In just an instant, the 3 bolts of lightning abruptly arrived, filling Lancelot's entire field of vision with dazzling electric light. Under that kind of lightning speed, there was no point in competing in terms of speed. Therefore, Lancelot didn't even move his body, only allowing the pair of eyes under the helmet to stare unwaveringly at the 3 bolts of lightning that shot towards him. At some point, his pupils slightly contracted. Under the full effect of the mind's eye skill, Lancelot clearly saw it. Among the 3 bolts of lightning that shot towards him, one of them suddenly trembled slightly. The dazzling electric light on it also slightly weakened. The moment it weakened, the bolt of lightning transformed into a human, imprinting Yarek's grave and stern face into Lancelot's eyes. However, that didn't make Lancelot certain that it was Yarek's true body. Even so, Lancelot's heart didn't have the slightest bit of hesitation. Immediately, Lancelot raised the long spear in his hand. On the long spear, a burst of electric light suddenly flickered. Lancelot was also a user of lightning. As an adventurer and an explorer, Yarek had an extremely thorough understanding of the so-called steel. Therefore, Yarek knew that controlling lightning was the symbol of the most original steel. Therefore, the hero who was known as the strongest steel could also control lightning, and could even transform the god relics bestowed by the gods of the heavens into heavenly lightning that could save the world, carrying out an indiscriminate bombardment in all directions. Although Lancelot wasn't at the level of a hero, this knight was also the most original steel god. Naturally, Lancelot could also control lightning to a certain extent, and even manipulate the weather, turning himself into a mist, thus obtaining an immortal body. Thus, holding the long spear that flickered with electric light, Lancelot heavily stabbed the long spear in his hand amidst the sound of a strong wind, ruthlessly piercing Yarek, who had transformed from lightning into a human. Bang! A low explosive sound abruptly rang out at this moment. The long spear that flickered with electric light suddenly pierced Yarek, who had transformed from lightning into a human, causing his figure to abruptly shatter into pieces. Wong! In that instant, the other 2 bolts of lightning shuddered and also transformed into human figures. Their bodies were covered in electric sparks as they directly charged toward Lancelot's body. Dong! The thunderous explosion turned into a substantial shockwave that spread across the entire ground. Beep beep beep. Dazzling lightning exploded from the center of the impact, instantly turning the surrounding area within a few hundred meters into a pool of lightning, causing the ground to tremble. Immediately, arcs of lightning shot out from the pool of lightning like pythons, flashing across the ground at an extremely fast speed. Then, the 2 bolts of lightning seemed to be repelled by the rampaging lightning pool at the same time. They shot out from opposite ends of the lightning pool, and heavily smashed into the ground not far away. Bang! The ground suddenly exploded, raising a cloud of sand and dust. After an unknown amount of time, the dust and lightning gradually subsided. In the 2 pits, Lancelot, who was riding on a white horse, and Yarek, whose body was flashing with electric arcs, appeared at the same time. The armor on one's body seemed to have become charred. The clothes on the other's body were tattered and covered in dust. Both of them were also in a sorry state. However, if one observed carefully, they would definitely be able to discover it. Although Lancelot's appearance was somewhat disheveled, his aura was not in any disorder. On the other hand, not only did the electric arcs flashing on Yarek's body weaken a lot, but he was also constantly gasping for breath. There was no need to explain who had the upper hand. As expected of the god-slaying demon king, who can find a way to win under any circumstances. You're really amazing to be able to make dust stick to my armor, even when I'm so restrained. Lancelot did not hide his admiration, but at the same time, there was a faint sense of regret in his tone. Possible, I really hope to continue fighting with you. However, it is not my style to show mercy in order to continue fighting. I will use my full strength and speed to charge forward. Black Prince, in your state, can you block my full blow? Hearing this, although Yarek was still gasping for breath, he laughed disdainfully. Block? That's not right. It should be my turn next. Lancelot was suddenly stunned. You've been dealing with me for a long time. Have you forgotten? Yarek sneered. Have you forgotten my goddess of vengeance? Lancelot's breath stopped. The goddess of vengeance. That was the power that Yarek had usurped from the three famous goddesses in Greek mythology: Alecto, Tisiphone, and Megala. In Greek mythology, Alecto, Tisiphone, and Megala were the goddesses of punishment. They were collectively known as the three goddesses of vengeance. According to legend, these three goddesses were three tall women with snake hair on their heads, bloody tears in their eyes, wings on their shoulders, torches in their hands, and snake whips in their hands. They were very terrifying. The three goddesses would chase humans who had committed the crime of murder on Earth, driving them mad. They were also responsible for carrying out punishment on the dead with sins in the underworld. They were the gods that the Greeks were most afraid of. It was the same as Luo Hao usurping the power of generals Hung Ha and Hung Ha. The power of the goddess of vengeance that Yarek had usurped came from the three goddesses who were a trinity. Only when the three of them were together could it be considered a complete divinity. With this power, Yarek would also have the right to take revenge on his enemies. He could spend a few minutes or even dozens of minutes to meditate and create the domain of vengeance. And when Yarek was in the domain of vengeance, all the attacks he received during this period would all be converted into the power of the three goddesses of vengeance and returned to the attacker without any change. Lancelot was also aware of the existence of this power. So Lancelot said without any confusion, "But I remember that this power requires the three goddesses to be summoned in advance, and after a certain period of meditation and ritual, it can only be used. It can't be used immediately in battle. Even if you use it now, as long as I withdraw from the domain of vengeance, this power will be useless." Withdraw from the domain of vengeance? Yarek suddenly laughed, and his laughter was unusually sarcastic. "Haven't you realized that you've already stepped into my territory of vengeance and launched quite a few attacks?" "What?" Lancelot was stunned at first, but then he finally understood and his expression changed abruptly. "It can't be. You guessed right." Yarek suddenly raised his head. "Long before you came here, I had already used the power of the goddess of vengeance to summon the three goddesses of vengeance and hid them underground. During this period of time you will have a good taste of the attacks you launched against me." Yarek loudly chanted the spirit of words. "Listen well, daughters of the eternal night, daughters of the earth and shadow." Under Yarek's spirit of words, the ground around him suddenly burst open, and three black shadows sprang out. They were three demonesses whose hair was all made up of snakes, and they had black wings like crows on their backs. "Curb evil with evil, pay crime with crime, sacrifice blood with blood, pay tooth for tooth." This is the starting point of vengeance. The blood of the mother who was killed by the enemy, in the most tragic way to tell you that you can no longer repay your kindness. The three goddesses of vengeance surrounding Yarek had a bloody glint in their eyes as they stared at Lancelot. Demonis Morgella, Avenger Tisiphone, Alecto the Endless, quickly reflect the curse back and complete your revenge. Now is the time for vengeance. At this moment, a powerful curse power burst out from Yarek and the three goddesses. Lancelot didn't even have time to react before the space around him suddenly distorted. Immediately, all of Lancelot's previous attacks against Yarek were turned into invisible power by the three goddesses of vengeance, and violently surged in Lancelot's direction. Victory and defeat were also decided in a few seconds. Chapter 1497. Whoosh! 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 A series of piercing sounds resounded in the sky. It was the sound of all sorts of weapons shooting out like arrows. The relics that turned into light beams and the god relics that turned into lightning bolts shot out of the golden ripples and the gigantic Manchala formation respectively. They tore through the air and tore through space like a storm. They collided hard mid-air. Bang! 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 Each collision was a collision between myths and legends. Every time they clashed, it was a clash between legends. All sorts of legendary weapons that were famous in myths and legends had turned into arrows at the moment. They were shot at their opponents in the most violent and wasteful way as their owners squandered them. Wong! Every time a relic shot out from the golden ripples, turning into a beam of light and shooting towards the hero, the golden ripples would suddenly tremble, and new relic would be ejected one after another. Clang! Each time the god relics shot out of the gigantic Manchala formation, and turned into lightning bolts that charged at Noah. The grids in the gigantic Manchala formation would glow and new god relics would appear one after another. Under such circumstances, Noah, who had golden ripples like water behind him, and the hero, who had a gigantic Manchala formation hovering behind him, stood in the air. They were not stingy at all as they unleashed their precious relics and god relics at each other. Undoubtedly, this was something that one would never see on a normal day. The reason being that the relics and god relics were charging at each other as if they were free. They collided with each other frequently, creating muffled explosions and scorching fire waves. The relics and god relics were mythical. Even the gods and heroes in all sorts of myths and legends would only own one of each relic and god relic under normal circumstances. However, it was such a weapon that allowed the gods and heroes to create their own legends. Nowadays, even the gods and heroes would only possess one mythical weapon under normal circumstances. They were all like worthless arrows that were thrown out by their owners one by one. What was squandering money like dirt? That was squandering money like dirt. However, both Noah and the hero had the right to squander money like that. Therefore, the battle fell into a stalemate. The hero who was holding the savior divine sword looked at Noah who was throwing relics at him. His eyes flickered a few times. Subsequently, he let go of the savior divine sword in his hand and allowed it to hover next to him. The hero extended his arm and took out a bow and arrow from one of the grids in the Manchala formation behind him. He held it in front of him and aimed it at Noah. He pulled the bowstring slowly. Bang! The arrow knocked on the bowstring immediately seemed to be on fire, exploding with an astonishing flame. Surya's arrow. Surya was the sun god in Hindu mythology. The undying hero Karna was his son. He was also the one who gave Karna the sun armor. Now the hero took out the arrow given to him by Surya, the sun god in Hindu mythology, and shot the sun god's arrow. The flaming arrow suddenly swelled up in the wind, emitting a dazzling light. It was as if it had turned into a sun, rubbing against the air as it shot toward Noah. Looking at the bright and dazzling sun, Noah's face was as calm as an ancient well. He extended his arm and reached into a golden ripple behind him. In the next moment, a trident that seemed to be made of gold emerged from the golden ripple. Noah held it tightly in his hand and pulled it out. Swoosh! A surge of water suddenly appeared on the trident that seemed to be made of gold. Like two water dragons, they surrounded the body of the trident and gradually swelled. Poseidon's trident. In Greek mythology, the god of the sea was Poseidon. According to legend, when he was angry, huge waves would rise in the ocean and heavy rain would fall from the sky. Every inch of land on the continent would sink into the water, and all life would be destroyed. The god of the sea's weapon was the trident. Using it, one could easily set off monstrous waves, storms, and tsunamis, sink the continent, and collapse the heavens and earth. Noah waved the trident in his hand toward the sun that was shooting toward him. The water around the trident suddenly exploded and turned into a monstrous wave. It surged out and covered the sky toward the sun that was shooting toward him. Amidst a bone-chilling sound, the sun was drowned by the monstrous waves. Half of the seawater was evaporated, and billowing steam filled the air, instantly covering the entire horizon. However, the remaining half of the seawater still surged out and mercilessly covered the direction of the hero. Looking at the monstrous wave, the hero's eyes narrowed. He released the bow in his hand and took out a new weapon from the mandala formation. It was a weapon called Vajra. Beep, beep, beep. A burst of lightning flashed from the weapon. Vajra. The term Vajra was originally used to describe the lightning used by Sakra. Indra was the heavenly emperor in Hindu mythology, also known as Indra. He was the king of gods in Hindu mythology and also the god of war. Later on, he even joined Buddhism and became the guardian god of Buddhism along with Brahma, one of the three supreme gods in Hindu mythology. Vajra was Sakra's weapon. The black rabbit that Noah knew was Sakra's family in the world of boxes. The god's persona weapon Vajra replica that he was using was a god's persona weapon that Sakra had given him. However, the hero was not using a god's persona weapon at the moment. Instead, he was using a real god's persona weapon that Indra had given him. The hero who was holding the Vajra replica lifted it above his head directly. The lightning flashing on it immediately surged. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts surged toward the monstrous wave that was surging toward him. Suddenly, the monstrous wave that was covered by tens of thousands of lightning bolts trembled. It was diminishing at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Soon, the The monstrous wave was dissolved by the tens of thousands of lightning bolts before it could even reach the hero. It evaporated into the air and disappeared completely. The tens of thousands of lightning bolts continued to surge, like a gradually expanding pool of lightning. Like a tide, they surged in Noah's direction. Seeing that, Noah narrowed his eyes and extended his hand toward the golden ripples that looked like water waves next to him again. This time a heavy hammer popped out of the golden ripples that looked like water waves. Noah held it tightly in his hand. Lightning bolts surged on it as well. Mjolnir. It was the weapon that was known as the most powerful in Norse mythology. Everyone knew that Odin was the main god of Norse mythology. He was also the king who ruled over the Norse gods. However, in Norse mythology, the most powerful god was not Odin, who was the main god, but Thor, who was known as the thunder god. The weapon that made Thor the invincible Mjolnir was the Mjolnir. In order to fight the king of gods in Hindu mythology, Indra the heavenly emperor's lightning, Noah used the most powerful weapon in Norse mythology, the thunder god's weapon. There was no hesitation at all. Noah raised the heavy hammer in his hand and swung it at the tens of thousands of lightning bolts that were attacking him. Pung! It was as if even space itself was smashed by the heavy hammer. Countless lightning bolts exploded from the heavy hammer. In the next second, tens of thousands of lightning bolts collided with the lightning pool formed by tens of thousands of lightning bolts. Rumble! Amidst the earth-shattering roar, the collision of lightning bolts burst into flames, causing a terrifying wave of fire to suddenly explode and cover the entire sky. Chapter 1498. Boom! A deafening explosion that was loud enough to shatter one's eardrums echoed through the sky. The sound of the explosion resounded across the sky, causing an extremely terrifying firestorm to sweep out from the clouds in an instant. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to a radius of several hundred meters. The terrifying firestorm swept across the sky. The scorching temperature caused the air above the clouds to be extremely dry. The majestic wave of fire spread across the sky like a curtain of fire, occupying a large part of the sky. It distorted and blurred the space around it. The waves of fire were still churning like the waves of the sea, sweeping in all directions. One could faintly see lightning bolts shooting out from the center of the wave of fire, bringing about a series of thunderous roars. That scene was simply like a storm of thunder and fire mixed together, wreaking havoc above the clouds. The clouds below were dyed green and red, and the colors were constantly changing. It was believed that the so-called heaven and earth phenomenon must be referring to such a situation. Nobody knew how long the wave of fire and lightning wreaked havoc before the shocking commotion above the clouds gradually subsided. In the sky far away, the two silhouettes were still facing each other without moving. One of them had golden ripples behind him, while the other had a magic square floating behind him. Their gazes met in mid-air. However, no matter if it was the golden ripple or the magic formation, there were no traces of the famous relics and god relics and all sorts of myths and legends on it. Of course, it was not because the Demon King and the hero had used up all their treasures as they fought in the most extravagant way. The hero aside, Noah's Gate of Babylon had an automatic retrieval function. No matter how many relics Noah threw out, the valuable relics would be retrieved one by one. None of them would be left out. Therefore, Noah did not take out any relics because he felt that there was no need to continue. It was clear that the hero had the same thought. If it's just a competition of our weapons, there's no way we'll be able to determine the victor, Hero said with great admiration. For thousands of years I've killed many demon kings, but I've never met an opponent like you. If it weren't for the weapons given to me by the gods in the heavens, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to defeat you. Why was Gilgamesh known as the strongest existence among the heroic spirits? The reason was simple. It was because the hero king had all the prototypes of relics since ancient times, and every heroic spirit had their own weaknesses in their own myths and legends. With all the noble phantasms, Gilgamesh could easily find the noble phantasms that targeted the weaknesses of his enemies and mercilessly kill them. Now Noah and the hero were in the same situation. No matter what kind of relics Noah used, the hero would be able to find a god relic that targeted it from his treasure vault. No matter what kind of god relic the hero took out, Noah would be able to find a relic that could defeat it from his treasure vault. Both of them were not competing with strength but wealth. In the end, no one would know who had the better collection unless they continued to compete. However, regardless of whether it was Noah or the hero, they did not have the patience to continue competing with the amount of items they had in their treasure vaults. Therefore, both of them stopped fighting at the same time. The golden ripples and the gigantic Manchala formation behind them disappeared, as if they had never existed in the first place. Noah then spoke coldly. If this continues, I'm afraid there'll be no end to it. I don't have that much time to play with you. Me too. I must complete my mission as soon as possible and fall into a deep slumber again. The hero agreed and suggested, in my opinion, from now on, let's not use weapons to attack each other. Let's just use force to determine the victor. Noah raised his brow when he heard that. He looked at the hero with a faint smile. That's easy for you to say. Even if you don't use the weapons given to you by the gods in the heavens, you still have the powerful divine sword. As for me, are you going to let me fight the divine sword that saved the world with my bare hands? There's nothing I can do about it. This saber is like a part of me, the warrior said, shaking his head. Although I still have the support of the ancient treaty, if I lose the divine sword, my strength will be greatly reduced. When that happens, I definitely won't be able to defeat you. That's why I have no choice but to use the divine sword. This really surprises me. Noah looked at the hero with some surprise. Undoubtedly, you have the support of the ancient treaty. You have the strength of 7 godslayers. Do you really think that you won't be able to defeat a single godslayer without the divine sword? I also find it unbelievable, but that's what I feel. The hero looked at Noah with an extremely serious expression. I can feel that you're different from the other godslayers. Your strength is beyond my imagination. Without the divine sword, I definitely won't be able to defeat you. Noah couldn't help but look at him in a new light when he heard the resolute and decisive words of the warrior. Your senses are very sharp, Noah said indifferently. That's right. The way I see it, if you don't have the divine sword, even if you have the support of the ancient treaty, you definitely won't be a threat. That's why I won't give up on the divine sword. The hero nodded calmly. Since you also have 1,000 weapons, you should be able to find a weapon that can rival my divine sword in your collection, right? The hero's words made Noah's mouth fall open slightly. Just as Noah was about to say something, a voice suddenly rang out in his mind. Noah's face froze. Then his eyes lit up and he suddenly smiled. You're right. My Aster won't lose to your divine sword that saved the world. As soon as he finished speaking, a crisscrossing sword mark on the back of Noah's hand emitted a blinding light. The dazzling light that blossomed from the elven engraving surged like a tide. Within it, a petite girl with long silver hair that reached her waist and a mysterious aura appeared. That's... The hero was a little surprised. Aster. Noah looked at the elven girl that appeared in the light. His tone became more or less excited. You're finally awake? Noah's voice made the elven girl that appeared in the light slowly open her eyes and stare at Noah. In those eyes there was a sense of mystery that could be easily seen by others. Also, there was a strong sense of attachment that could only be seen by Noah. Master! With a soft call, Aster floated out of the light and followed the pull of gravity towards Noah. Noah opened his arms towards the elven girl that descended from the sky. With a gentle movement, he embraced Aster, who was leaping into his arms, and chanted, Cold Steel Queen, holy sword that slays demons and demons, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power. It was an incantation that was written in a completely different language. Even the hero didn't know that in this world, only Noah knew the elven language. In the midst of the incantation, the elven girl that leaped into Noah's arms slowly closed her eyes. Her whole body disintegrated into light particles and gathered in Noah's palm. Then, the silver holy sword gradually took shape and was tightly held in Noah's hand. Clang! A dazzling light blossomed from the silver holy sword. It was comparable to the light of the sun, a brilliant white light that illuminated the entire cloud. The hero widened his eyes slightly and tightened his grip on the divine blade of salvation. Clang! The divine blade of salvation suddenly bloomed with a dazzling light, as if it was trying to fight for the space occupied by the brilliant white light. The platinum light instantly surged in all directions like waves. Holding the silver holy sword tightly, Noah closed his eyes. Aster, with your power, can you win against that divine blade? No problem. Aster's voice that didn't have any confusion or emotion sounded in Noah's mind. With Master's current power, as long as you can perfectly control my power, you can defeat that divine blade. That's a reliable declaration. Noah's lips slowly curled up. Then Aster, let's go. I am Master's sword, Aster said without hesitation. As you wish. Chapter 1499. In the box, in order to help Letitia escape from the Demon King game, Noah used the Dragon Emperor transformation ability to multiply Aster's power, causing Aster to fall into a deep sleep. However, it wasn't because Aster couldn't bear the enormous power that caused him to fall into a deep sleep. Instead, it was because the power multiplied stimulated Aster's own power, causing Aster to enter an awakened state. As the strongest sword spirit in the elemental world, Aster was once feared by the 5 Elven Kings and the Dark Elven King. In other words, this sword spirit's power could even threaten the Elven Kings who controlled the world's elements. Naturally, not just anyone could wield such great power. Sometimes, if the power of a contracted spirit was too great, to the point that the Elven Master couldn't control it, then after the contract was formed, the contracted spirit's power would be limited to a certain extent. This was just like the subordination contract in the box. In the box, if the power of the enslaved party was too great, then the enslaved party's power would decrease, to the extent that the enslaved party would be unable to control the enslaved party. The situation between Luos and the Demon Star Spirit Argel was a good example of this. This situation also applied between an Elven Master and a contracted spirit. If the contracted spirit's power was far beyond what the Elven Master could control, then the contracted spirit's power would decrease, and it wouldn't be strange if he couldn't control it. When he formed the contract with Aster, Noah was only a newly minted Elven Master. Although he had great power as an Elven Master, he was only a rookie. Naturally, he couldn't draw out much power from the strongest sword spirit during the contract. In view of this, after concluding the contract, Noah and Aster would often hone each other's tacit understanding in private and improve the abilities of the elves, hoping that one day they would be able to draw out Aster's power that even the Elven King feared. Now this moment had finally arrived. The moment he held the Demon Slayer, Noah felt the difference from before. As Noah imbued the Demon Slayer in his hand with a huge amount of divine might, an unprecedented amount of divine might was also fed back to him. Under such circumstances, Noah could clearly feel the power of the Demon Slayer in his hand. Sharpness, hardness, accuracy, and even explosiveness had all undergone a qualitative improvement. What's more, even the Demon Slayer's ability to break curses had reached a terrifying level. Holding the Demon Slayer tightly, Noah took a deep breath and instantly converted half of the energy in his body into divine might, and the other half into divine power. All evildoers, be afraid of my power. Now I shall obtain the majesty of 10 mountains, the strength of 100 rivers, and the strength of 1,000 giant dragons. The majestic me shall raise the ferocious power to slay dragons. Deep in Noah's heart, the stone plate floating in the cosmic sea turned and pointed at the incarnation of the Dragon Emperor. A crimson wave of air rose from Noah's body and turned into the phantom of a crimson dragon. Boost, 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 boost. Above the phantom of the crimson dragon, the jade gems lit up one after another and released voices, causing a surge of power to flow through Noah's body and release an incomparably powerful aura. Sensing that Noah's aura was becoming more and more powerful, the hero's eyes became serious. Immediately, the hero raised the divine blade of salvation in his hand and pointed it high into the sky. Hum! Accompanied by a trembling sound, a blinding light bloomed from the divine blade of salvation. It soared into the sky and gradually condensed. Not long after, the blinding light from the divine blade of salvation turned into a small sun, illuminating the entire sky. Noah had seen that move once before. It was the same move that the hero had used to sink the entire invisible island when he had just awakened. Legend had it that the divine blade of salvation had the power to cut even stars. That legend was referring to this move. The hero's divine blade of salvation that had annihilated the Demon King not only combined the forms of the weapons that the gods of the heavens had given it, but it was also one with the hero. It was like a divine relic that was part of the hero's body. Therefore, apart from being able to release the Manchala formation, this divine blade also had two abilities that were closely related to the hero. The other was the same as the original steel. The ability to release lightning. This ability was the so-called lightning of salvation. The other was the same as the steel god. It could extract a large amount of energy from the earth and turn it into an attack that could cut stars. This ability was called the light of salvation. Now the hero was using the second ability. Divine blade that is connected to my life. Show the light of salvation and bring peace to the world. The hero chanted the sacred words and stepped into the void. He raised the divine blade in his hand and pointed it at the small sun above him. Like a god holding up the sun, he shook his arm and suddenly swung it down. In an instant, the sun that was shining brightly was like a huge meteor of light that fell from the sky. It rubbed against the air, and even the edges of its outline were flashing with red flames. It fell furiously in Noah's direction. Bang, 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 bang. Wherever the dazzling sun passed, the air would explode. Even the clouds below were shattered in an instant. It was as if the real sun had fallen. With unparalleled power, it suppressed Noah's direction. Raising his head, Noah looked at the scene that resembled the falling sun. His robes fluttered in the strong wind, but a fierce light flashed in his eyes. Clang! Gorgeous white light spread out from the holy sword in Noah's hand like a tide. Holding the holy sword that was also blooming with blinding light, but the light was not platinum. It was pure white. Noah fiercely stepped into the void. With a dong sound, his whole body rushed up and rushed toward the falling platinum sun. The brilliant white light that bloomed from the holy sword covered Noah's whole body with a layer of light. From afar, it looked like a comet that shot into the sky and violently shot toward the falling platinum sun. The scene was extremely shocking. In this way, the comet that shot into the sky directly hit the platinum sun. It was at this moment that a clear voice reverberated in the air. Absolute sword skill. Formbreaker Ardent Flower Spiral Sword Dance 36 consecutive strikes. As soon as the voice fell, it heavily hit the front of the comet that was above the platinum sun, and a burst of sword light flashed. Clang, 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 clang. Amidst the crisp sword sound, streaks of sword light flashed across the surface of the platinum sun like a storm. They swept past the platinum sun at a speed faster than the speed of sound. The slash that turned into a sword light cut the platinum sun into countless petals, causing the falling platinum sun to suddenly stop in midair and collapse completely. An earth-shattering roar resounded. The platinum sun exploded in the sky, turning into light particles that scattered in all directions. What? The hero was shocked. An attack that could even cut a star was actually cut open. While the hero was still in shock, the comet that heavily hit the platinum sun in the sky suddenly turned and cut through the space. It was as fast as lightning, blowing away the light particles that filled the sky and rushing toward the hero. Only then did the hero react. Looking at the comet that was violently shooting toward him, he quickly raised the divine blade of salvation in his hand. Clang! The crisp sound of metal clashing reverberated clearly in the sky. The holy sword and the divine blade that were blooming with blinding light collided with each other, causing a dazzling flash. Beep, beep, beep. Immediately after, amidst the sound of thunder, the bright electric light on the divine blade surged violently to the holy sword. Chapter 1500. Beep, beep, beep. Amidst the ear-piercing sound of electricity, bolts of lightning exploded on the divine blade of salvation. They were like pythons that instantly slithered onto the holy sword's blade. However, when the bolts of lightning that slithered onto the holy sword's blade came into contact with the brilliant white light of the demon slayer, they evaporated like water vapor and instantly turned into a wisp of green smoke amidst sizzling sounds. Seeing this happen, the hero was also extremely shocked. Even the lightning of salvation is ineffective? I'm sorry. Noah looked up and sneered when he saw the shock in the hero's eyes. My Aster has an extremely powerful ability to break curses. Now that I've fully unleashed my power, I can even break the powers of gods and godslayers one by one, including the divine blade in your hand. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah suddenly dodged and took a step back. A huge amount of divine power gathered under his feet, and it exploded again. Ultimate sword skill. Primary form purple lightning. Noah, who had just taken a small step back, turned into a bolt of lightning in an instant. The holy sword in his hand, which was glowing with a brilliant white light, pierced towards the hero's chest mercilessly. The hero had no time to be surprised. He almost reflexively dodged to the side. Chi! The lightning-like spike immediately brushed past the side of the brave man's chest, cutting through his clothes and landing in the air. The hero could even clearly feel the cold touch in front of him, proving that the holy sword had pierced through his skin. If the hero's dodge had been even 0.1 second slower, there would have been a gash in front of him. If it had been anyone else in such a thrilling situation, they would have felt a chill in their heart. However, the hero was an expert who had annihilated all the godslayers since ancient times. He felt his heart tighten, and a burst of violent lightning erupted from his body. Clang! Although the burst of lightning did not reach the silver holy sword, it bounced the holy sword away from the hero's body. Then the hero took a step forward and raised the divine blade in his hand. Like a windmill dancing in the wind, he heavily slashed toward Noah's waist. Clang! This time it was Noah's turn to raise the holy sword in his hand. With a crisp sound he blocked the divine blade's heavy slash. As the saying goes, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and violence for violence. As if intending to return the favor, Noah also made the crimson dragon shadow on his body soar, causing the airwave that turned into air scales to be like a shock wave, blasting it away. Bang! Amidst the muffled sounds, the hero was struck by the crimson shockwave and was sent flying. However, at that moment the hero kicked Noah in the chest. Bang! With the same muffled sound, Noah, who had ignited his air scales, could not block the hero's kick. He was sent flying. Thus, one was sent flying by the air scales while the other was sent flying by the kick. Noah and the hero were both sent flying, creating a sharp sound that reverberated in the sky. It did not dissipate for a long time. However, almost at the same time, Noah and the hero steadied themselves and looked up. Their eyes met in the air and sparks flew. Then Noah and the hero both stomped on the void and shot out like bullets. They swung their holy sword and divine blade at each other. Clang! The crisp sound of collision was mixed with a shock wave that spread out like a ripple. Clang, 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 clang. In the sky, two figures crisscrossed each other like two bolts of lightning chasing after each other. As they flashed and flew, they collided with each other frequently, causing the sound of steel colliding to spread out like water ripples. It also set off waves of shocking wind ripples, causing people to be terrified just by looking at them. Looking from afar, one could only see two meteors chasing each other. Sometimes they wandered in the sky. Sometimes they collided ruthlessly. Sometimes they flashed through space. Sometimes they intertwined with each other. Under such circumstances, the holy sword and the divine saber clashed repeatedly, causing the crisp sounds of clashing to resound through the sky. At the same time, they also cut through the air. Every time they clashed, the surrounding atmosphere would become chaotic, and their momentum could not be said to be small. As a result, after a round of confrontation, the hero who was attacking the Demon King and the Demon King who was attacking the hero were evenly matched. Neither side could do anything to the other. In terms of physical strength, Noah and the hero were actually on par. Noah had the blessing of ability value that was about to be promoted to LV6. In terms of physical strength, he was not inferior to a god. The hero was the strongest steel, so his physical strength was naturally extraordinary. He was not inferior to Noah at all. In terms of weapons, Noah had the holy sword that even the Elf King was afraid of, and the hero had the divine blade that could even cut a star. In terms of the level of strength, Noah's incarnation of the Dragon Emperor had multiplied to the limit, and the hero had also used the Ancient Covenant to increase the strength equivalent to 7 Godslayers. In terms of defense, Noah had the air scale protection, and the hero also had the thunder lightning protection. In terms of skills, Noah's sword skills were superb, and the hero was not inferior to Noah. In this way, the two of them were naturally on par with each other. Of course, Noah could also use 2 incarnations to fight at the same time. However, at present, Noah had already used the dragon's son's sovereignty to strengthen his physical strength, and not to strengthen his spirit. Once he used 2 incarnations without the dragon's son's sovereignty to strengthen his spirit, even if Noah could bear the burden of using 2 incarnations at the same time, he could not guarantee how long he could bear the burden of using 2 incarnations. And if the dragon's son's sovereignty was used to strengthen his spirit, Noah's strength would be reduced by more than half in an instant. In that case, without the support of enough divine power, Aster's true strength would not be able to be displayed. At that time, the divine blade that could cut a star would become a threat. Therefore, unless it was the most critical moment, casually using the power of 2 incarnations would only lead to one's death. Until the time came to determine the outcome of the battle, Noah had to hide this trump card with a time limit. Clang! Another heavy sound of steel colliding rang out. The 2 figures that had turned into 2 meteors chasing each other passed by each other, retreating rapidly in the ripples of the strong wind. Their eyes were fixed on each other, not moving for a moment. In a battle of such intensity, it would only take a moment to shift one's gaze away from one's opponent, and one would be forced into a desperate situation. Therefore, Noah and the hero had their eyes fixed on each other. Their eyes were filled with seriousness and light. At that moment, the hero's face froze all of a sudden. He flipped his hand, and a golden disc appeared in his hand. Noah's eyes focused as he looked at the disc. Of course, Noah would not forget about the disc. It was the god relic that stored the sword god's summoning authority called the arrowhead disc. It seemed like after Guinevere's death, the god relic had returned to its rightful owner, the hero. After all, the sword god's summoning authority stored in the god relic was the hero's authority. No matter if it was Noah or the hero, both of them had their eyes on the arrowhead disc at that moment. Then both of them noticed something. 2 brand new sword seals slowly appeared on the disc and were imprinted on it. The hero fell silent for a moment as he looked at the 2 sword seals that were slowly appearing. Both of them have been defeated. Noah understood what was going on when he heard that. Lancelot and the masked wind god had been defeated by Luo Hao and Yarek. However, that was not good news. The reason being, Lancelot and the masked wind god's godheads must have been absorbed by the arrowhead disc. Therefore, one could already foresee what would happen next. Just like how Noah was hiding his trump card, the hero was hiding his trump card as well. It seems like I can't drag this on any longer. The hero looked at Noah. Although it's a little unfair, this disc is also my authority and my power. So please forgive me. The golden disc flashed with a bright light as soon as he was done speaking. In the next second, 4 silhouettes appeared around the hero out of thin air. Noah's expression turned grim when he saw that. Chapter 1501. Looking at the group of people who appeared out of thin air around the hero and surrounded him as if they wanted to protect him, Noah could not help but be speechless. The 4 of them could be regarded as Noah's acquaintances. One of them was a handsome man riding on a winged celestial horse. One was ape deity who was riding on a golden cloud. One was a knight riding on a handsome white horse. One was wind god, who was surrounded by whirlwinds and was covered in bandages. He also wore a mask on his face. Perseus, great sage, heaven's equal. Lancelot, masked wind god. The group of 4 gods of disobedience surrounded the hero and cast their gazes on Noah. Godslayer. Perseus revealed a smile that was as refreshing as the sun. We meet again. I didn't expect that I would have the chance to fight with you again. Great sage, heaven's equal laughed heartily. It couldn't be better. As expected, I was resurrected along with him. Lancelot spun the long spear in his hand and spoke with some helplessness and some joy. It's a little despicable for a dead person to use this method to come back to life, but there's no other way. Apart from being an invincible warrior, I'm also a servant who protects my master. Let me fulfill my duty as well. Only masked wind god looked at Noah silently. In order to protect the secret of the hero, he firmly pursued the doctrine of mysticism. Waves of powerful curse power surged out from the gods, and like invisible waves, they spread out in layers. Noah's excellent sensing ability allowed him to clearly feel the powerful curse power surging from the 4 gods of disobedience, including Perseus, great sage, heaven's equal, Lancelot, and masked wind god. Almost every wave of curse power was 100 times stronger than that of an ordinary magician or conjurer. However, it was precisely because of this that Noah frowned slightly. It was not because the curse power of the 4 gods of disobedience was too strong. On the contrary, the curse power that surged from Perseus, great sage equaling heaven, Lancelot, and the masked wind god was much weaker than before. This result made Noah's heart skip a beat. Could it be? As expected, I can't hide anything from you. The hero had been observing Noah's performance, and when he saw the surprise on his face, he sighed. Although I have the power to resurrect my own kind and summon steel again, this power is not without limits. The strength of the steel generals that you resurrected has decreased, right? Noah nodded in understanding. That's right. That makes sense. Otherwise, if you could resurrect your dead brethren in their complete states, you could gather combat power and annihilate the Godslayer with sheer numbers. There's no need for any ancient treaty or the divine blade of salvation. You're right, the hero admitted. If only one is resurrected, then his strength can be restored to its peak. However, if there are more of them, the power will be dispersed. In their current state, they probably only have 70% of their strength when they were alive, right? Noah's gaze swept across the gods that were supporting the hero. 70% of their strength, but there are 4 more of them. It's a very useful power, isn't it? That's why I'm using this power. The hero nodded solemnly, and then his gaze swept across the 4 gods of disobedience around him. Everyone, please lend me your power. You want to use my power to conquer the demon king? My savior. Perseus pulled out his saber from his waist in a forthright manner. Although I don't like to be ordered around, there's no other way in this situation. Old son, I have no objections. Great Sage equaling heaven flipped his hand, and the Rui Jingu Bang appeared in his hand. Since you've given me a chance to kill my enemy, then I'll lend you some of my power. Wielding a spear for my lord is Lancelot's long-cherished wish, Lancelot declared loudly. To be able to run at full speed once again, I'm satisfied. Masked Wind God clenched his fist without saying a word, causing the whirlwind around him to become even more violent. At this moment, the 4 gods of steel locked their hostility on Noah. Looking at Noah, who was holding the silver holy sword, the hero spoke in a low voice. Don't hate me. As soon as he finished speaking, what are you waiting for? Great Sage equaling heaven shouted. Do it. As soon as he finished speaking, the 4 gods of steel suddenly shot out. Almost at the same time, Noah retreated without hesitation, trying his best to distance himself from the 4 gods of disobedience. However, that was meaningless. This was because Excellency Ape, who was stepping on a golden cloud, and Wind God, whose body was surging with a storm, had released the power of seraphic speed at the first moment. With a terrifying speed that no one could match, they turned into phantoms and flashed in front of Noah in an instant. Godslayer! Great Sage equaling heaven shouted loudly. Have a taste of the power of Old Son's Rui Jingu Bang. Before he could finish his sentence, the Great Sage equaling heaven's steel rod, which weighed 13,500 pounds, was like a heavy mountain. With a swing it was aimed at Noah's head. At the same time, Masked Wind God also raised a huge fist, which was swirling with a whirlwind to the extreme. Like a cannonball, it was heavily aimed at Noah's chest. The power of the steel rod and the fist shook the air, causing a heavy sonic boom to sound in the air. Even if such a blow landed on steel, it would be able to shatter it in an instant. Looking at the steel rod and the fist, which contained terrible power, smashing towards him, Noah finally had to take it seriously. I am the strongest and I hold all victory in my hands. Whether it is a human or a demon, I am the one who defeats the hostility of all enemies. I will defeat any enemy that is in my way. The holy words of the God of Victory, who is always victorious, turned into a spirit of speech, causing all the divine power that were sleeping in Noah's energy source to boil. Bang! The red air scales that covered Noah's whole body suddenly rose, like a dragon-shaped armor, protecting Noah in it. Dong! The steel rod and the heavy fist fell on the red air scales, causing a circle of ripples. At this time, Perseus, who was riding on the back of the celestial horse, and Lancelot, who was riding on the back of the white horse, had somehow circled behind Noah and galloped towards him. Don't forget about me. I can finally fight with you. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. With extremely passionate shouts, Perseus and Lancelot whipped their horses and charged towards Noah's back at an extremely fast speed. Swoosh! The sword in Perseus' hand cut through the wind and slashed towards Noah's neck in an extremely heroic manner. Whoosh! The long spear in Lancelot's hand pierced out explosively, piercing towards Noah's back amidst the sharp sound of the air being torn apart. Feeling the strong wind coming from behind, Noah was just about to react when another piercing sound resounded in front of him. 3 arrows turned into flaming light beams and streaked across the sky. At an extremely tricky angle, they brushed past the bodies of the Great Sage, heaven's equal and the masked wind god, who were blocking in front of Noah, and shot towards Noah. That arrow was shot by the brave warrior who was guarding the rear with his longbow. Furthermore, each and every one of those arrows contained the power of the ancient covenant. Noah had reason to believe that those arrows could break through the air scales on his body. At that time, the attacks of Perseus, the great sage, heaven's equal, Lancelot, and the masked wind god would all fall on Noah and kill him. This made Noah somewhat angry. Don't be too arrogant. The silver holy sword that was held tightly in Noah's hand suddenly shone brightly. Ultimate sword skill. Form 3 Dance of the Shadow Moon. A full moon suddenly expanded like a crescent arc. With Noah's sudden rotation, it suddenly appeared and swept towards the surroundings. Clang! The sudden appearance of the moonlight heavily bounced off the attacks of the 4 disobedient gods, and sent the people surrounding Noah flying. Chapter 1502. Oh! Wah! Goo! Under the moonlight / Perseus, the great sage, heaven's equal, Lancelot, and the masked wind god all let out miserable cries as they were sent flying in 4 different directions. Whoosh! However, the 3 flaming arrows shot by the hero still shot straight towards Noah's throat, heart and abdomen, landing on the air scales on Noah's body. Bang! With a muffled explosion, the 3 flaming arrows, which were supported by the power of the ancient covenant, suddenly exploded the air scales on Noah's body, causing the crimson dragon shadow that overlapped on Noah's body to disappear, revealing his body. With the disappearance of the crimson dragon silhouette, the torrential energy flowing through Noah's body abruptly weakened and finally disappeared. That power was multiplied by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Relying on this multiplied power, Noah was able to compete with the hero, who was supported by the ancient covenant and had the power of 7 godslayers. Now the multiplied power had all disappeared, allowing Noah to return to his normal state. However, that was to be expected. The crimson dragon shadow on Noah's body was originally the product of the fusion of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear's balance breaker and the Dragon Emperor's incarnation's chi scale. Originally, the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear's balance breaker was supposed to be a crimson red full body armor. However, after the fusion with Noah's Dragon Emperor incarnation, the balance breaker of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear also fused with the air scales. After the gas scales fused with the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear balance breaker, the result was that the crimson full body armor turned into a crimson gaseous armor. Now that the crimson dragon's shadow had been destroyed, it was equivalent to the balance breaker effect of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear being destroyed as well. Naturally, the increased power would disappear. Feeling that the powerful aura on Noah's body had decreased several times in an instant, the hero with the longbow immediately ordered, "Now!" Perseus, the great sage, heaven's equal, Lancelot, and the masked wind god, who were sent flying by the moonlight / instantly increased the power of the curse in their bodies. Then, the 4 of them stabilized their bodies and once again charged in the direction of Noah. The 4 gods of disobedience who were sent flying in 4 different directions suddenly rushed in from all directions and surrounded Noah. He believed that as long as the 4 gods of disobedience got close, they would launch the fiercest attack at the same time. At that time, even if Lancelot and the others only had 70% of their peak strength left, without the multiplied power of the Dragon Emperor, and without the protection of the Dragon Emperor's air scales, the best outcome for Noah would be to be a serious injury. Once the air scales were broken, a buffer period would be needed to recover. At this time, Noah could not immediately use the multiplied power and air scales ability. However, that did not mean that Noah could not use the power of the other incarnations. I, with my violent heart, tightly cover the sky. I declare, roll up a storm for me, rain for me, and never allow you to disobey my orders. In the depths of Noah's heart, the image representing the storm lit up. Dong! Accompanied by a thunderous sound, a storm shook out from Noah's body and turned into the most violent tornado. Like a shock wave, it blew in all directions at an extremely fast speed. Perseus, great sage equaling heaven, Lancelot, and the masked wind god who were charging toward Noah were all shocked. But it was too late to react at this time. The violent tornado completely engulfed the 4 gods of disobedience. Bang! At this time, a crimson wave of air rose from Noah's body and turned into a dragon shadow that overlapped with his body. The air scales were finally restored. At this moment, Noah finally used 2 incarnations at the same time. On the crimson dragon's shadow, the precious gems began to emit voices, allowing the multiplied power to be channeled into the violent tornado that was stirred up by the tremors. The violent tornado suddenly trembled, and its color gradually turned red. Like a volcanic eruption, it caused an incomparably ferocious and terrifying power to fluctuate in the wind. The sudden increase in power of the tornado instantly turned into the most brutal power, and every gust of wind became a heavy pressure. The four gods of disobedience were swallowed by the tornado. Before they could even scream, they were instantly crushed by the terrifying power of the tornado, leaving not a trace of flesh behind. What? The hero's expression finally changed abruptly. At this moment, the crimson storm howled and expanded like a giant tornado, rushing in the direction of the hero. The hero's expression changed again and again, and he hurriedly manipulated the spirits supporting his body. Like a fallen leaf in a gust of wind, he retreated rapidly with the help of the gust of wind to avoid the terrifying tornado that was roaring toward him. However, with the multiplied power of the Dragon Emperor, the strength of the storm incarnation increased by too much. Therefore, the terrifying crimson tornado expanded faster and faster, and it didn't take long for it to catch up with the hero. Hiya! The hero, who couldn't avoid it, could only shout. He raised the divine blade of salvation in his hand and tightly gripped the hilt with both hands. Then, he slashed down heavily at the tornado that was sweeping toward him. Clang! The light of salvation bloomed on the divine blade of salvation. The blade, which could even cut stars in half, was like a flash of light as it slashed through the outer wall of the tornado. Poochie! With a tearing sound, the tornado that could be easily crushed by Perseus, the great sage, heaven's equal, Lancelot, and the masked wind god was actually split in half by the divine blade of salvation. However, the hero didn't feel any joy at all. His pupils suddenly shrank to the size of needles. Amidst the piercing sound of something breaking through the air, a figure shot out from the storm that had been split in half. Like an arrow that had been released from a bow, the figure rushed in front of the hero. You? The hero's eyes widened. There, Noah's dark and deep eyes flashed with a fierce light. He raised the holy sword in his hand and mercilessly slashed down at the hero. Looking at the sharp blade that was getting closer and closer, the hero shouted again at the critical moment. His body surged with bright electric light. Poochie! With a crisp tearing sound, Noah's sword split the dazzling electric light that burst from the hero's body, just like how the hero had cut the tornado in half. Then, looking at the hero whose pupils shrank, Noah suddenly clenched his fists. Giant that blots out the sky supports the world with his hand. I will let this divine power flow into my body. From now on, I will display the ultimate power that no one can match at this moment. Among the powers of Noah's 10 incarnations, the most powerful one, the giant flashed with light. The power that could split mountains and seas instantly filled Noah's body. There was no hesitation. Noah's arm suddenly shook, and he blasted a fist with terrifying power at the hero. Bam! A deafening sound that made one's heart tremble exploded in the sky. Poochie! The terrifying power caused the hero to spit out a mouthful of blood. His entire chest was smashed, and his body was like a broken piece of trash. He hung down powerlessly and fell from the high clouds to the ground with the help of gravity. Chapter 1503. Shio! High up in the clouds, the sound of a meteor crashing resounded. A figure was like a kite with a broken string, penetrating through the clouds and turning into a meteorite that created sparks due to friction with the air. It fell back down at a terrifying speed that was above the speed of sound. In the end, the figure that turned into a meteorite heavily smashed into a beach. Bang! In the loud muffled explosion, a corner of the beach stirred up a thick cloud of sand, mixed with a violent impact wind, violently spreading in all directions. At this time, Noah finally descended from the sky and landed on the beach. Ugh! Just as he landed on the beach, Noah's face showed traces of pain, causing him to involuntarily hold his head and let out a painful groan. This was caused by using two avatars at the same time, which caused his mind to bear an excessive burden. It was just as Noah had expected. Without the blessing of the dragon's son sovereign, using two avatars at the same time, even if the physical burden could be completely ignored with the ability value that was about to reach LV6, the mental burden was not. At this time, Noah felt like a live iron rod drilled into his head, very uncomfortable. Seeing Noah's appearance, Aster's voice involuntarily rang in Noah's mind. "Master." "I'm fine." Noah held his head, took a deep breath and said so. Fortunately, using 2 avatars at the same time did not take a long time. It was just a little painful, but the burden was not too big. Aster, who was connected to Noah's mind, could easily sense that Noah was not lying, so he was relieved. Noah, who felt the pain slightly lessen, let out a sigh of relief, raised his head and looked forward. There, the thick sand and dust that accompanied the shockwave began to gradually dissipate, revealing the scene within the sand and dust. A huge crater sat in the sand and dust, with gravel and stones rolling inside. In the middle of the crater, the hero lay there, spitting out mouthfuls of blood. The hero seemed to want to stand up, but did not succeed. This was because he couldn't even move a single finger. He took a closer look. The warrior's chest had caved in completely. That was definitely a fatal wound. It was a fatal wound that even a god could not escape. After all, even though Noah did not reveal himself and was unable to display the full power of the giant form, with the support of the giant form, Noah's full power attack was something that even 16 knights, who had broken the rules of the physical ability of the giant form, would not be able to match. Even a mountain would crumble in an instant after being hit by such a blow, let alone a body. Even though the hero was a god, being hit by such a blow was undoubtedly a fatal blow. Rather, it would be more accurate to say that the brave warrior was still able to struggle at death's door, even when his chest was completely caved in. His vitality was already very tenacious. However, there was no doubt. The brave ones could no longer fight. Cough cough. The warrior coughed up blood continuously. Due to his heavy injuries, he was unable to move at all. However, the warrior gritted his teeth and raised his head to look in Noah's direction. Noah met the hero's gaze and remained silent. Under such circumstances, the hero tried his best to squeeze out a smile. "This time, I have indeed lost." The hero's voice was extremely weak. It was so weak that if the wind was slightly stronger and the distance was slightly further, it would have been impossible to hear. However, Noah heard it clearly. He heard the hero's words. "But this is only temporary." The hero stared at Noah closely. "I will be back." Leaving behind this sentence, it was unclear whether it was advice or a warning. The hero slowly closed his eyes and lowered his head. The next moment, the hero's body flashed with a platinum light and turned into the shape of a sword. Clang! With a crisp sound, the sword that was blooming with platinum light fell from mid-air, and the tip of the sword was embedded in the ground. That was naturally the divine blade of salvation. Noah furrowed his brows tightly as he looked at the divine saber that was stuck in the pit. The blade was radiating platinum light. It was not until this moment that Noah finally remembered. Athena had once said that the brave had an extremely powerful immortality. Even if he defeated the hero would only transform into the divine blade and enter a dormant state. In a few months or as long as a few years, the hero would revive and wake up from his dormant state. When that happened, Noah would have to face this troublesome hero again. "Aster," Noah said with a frown, "can you cut that divine blade in half?" "I'm not sure." Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind again. "However, I don't feel like I can cut it in half, so there shouldn't be a way." "There shouldn't be a way." Noah's frown deepened. "Even if I use the incarnation of the Dragon Emperor to increase your power, it still won't work?" "I don't think so." It was rare for Aster to say something without confidence. "Although I don't know the nature of the sword, as a sword spirit, I can feel that it's immortal." Noah's tightly furrowed brows immediately loosened, and a troubled expression appeared on his face. In reality, Noah had already guessed that. After all, immortal god relics were not rare at all. Back then, wasn't Noah also unable to destroy the Holy Grail and retrieve the world fragment from it? That sacred magic tool was an undying and indestructible type. Since even the Holy Grail, which was created for the sake of the brave, was immortal, then it was not strange that the divine blade of salvation, which was known as the strongest divine relic, could be immortal and indestructible, which was formed from countless weapons given to the brave by the gods of the heavenly realm. Otherwise, if the divine blade could be easily destroyed, the hero would not have been able to successfully kill the demon king and complete his mission. Could it be that there was no way to deal with the divine blade of salvation? Just when Noah was feeling helpless, A voice rang in his mind. I've told you that you can't defeat that man. The voice did not belong to Aster. Noah was startled for a moment, and then he was surprised. Athena? You're awake? Even if an immortal snake goes into hibernation, it will wake up in spring, Athena said calmly and arrogantly. With this characteristic, I've decided to wake up before I went into hibernation. It's either when you're killed by that man, or when you're defeated by him. I'll only wake up when these two times arrive. Is that so? Noah forced a smile. What can you do even if you wake up? I can't pretend that I didn't hear you. Athena's voice was cold and there was a hint of dissatisfaction in it. Are you saying that this concubine can't be of any use? Noah was stunned when he heard that. His eyes lit up immediately. Do you have a way to destroy the divine blade? However, Athena poured a bucket of cold water on him. No, that displeasing steel cannot be destroyed. Even if you were able to defeat the hero, it would still be the same. That being said, Athena's tone changed again. However, if you want to get rid of that man, you don't need to destroy the divine blade. You don't need to destroy the divine blade. Noah quickly asked. Then what should I do? I've thought about this problem before, but after I fused with you, this problem was solved, Athena said. After becoming one with you, I was able to see your life from the depths of your heart. Noah's eyes widened. Did Athena see my life? Doesn't that mean? As if she saw through Noah's thoughts, Athena laughed out loud. Should I say that you're the one who transcends the world? Or the lucky one who is protected by the world? Even though I'm the goddess of wisdom, I didn't expect you to be such an existence. No wonder you're my fated one. As expected. Athena knew all of Noah's secrets. Thanks to you, I saw the hope of defeating that man. Athena's words were shocking. Noah Dole, turn me into the steel that saves the world. Chapter 1504. For a moment, Noah even wondered if he had heard wrongly. However, Athena's indifferent tone dispelled Noah's doubts. Turn me into the taboo steel. This way, the man's mission will be ended by you. Wait. Noah hurriedly shouted for him to stop. He took a deep breath and calmed down the astonishment in his heart before asking, What are you doing? You said that I will turn you into the divine sword of salvation? I know what you're thinking. Athena's tone didn't change at all. She was still as calm as ever. But you did not hear wrongly. I will turn into the steel of salvation and help you defeat the hero. Even if you say that, I still don't understand. Noah directly asked. What is going on? It is actually very simple. If you think about it carefully, you will understand. Athena did not keep Noah in suspense and answered Noah's question very straightforwardly. The divine sword is an existence that is integrated with the man. Therefore, once the man dies, he will turn into the divine sword and fall into a deep slumber. Then, as long as the divine sword is destroyed, the man will naturally not be able to awaken and will fall into eternal slumber. He will return to the myth and be defeated by you. Unfortunately, the divine sword is indestructible, Athena said. If that is the case, then there is no need to destroy the divine sword. Just kill the man who is the object of the divine sword. The divine sword that was integrated with the hero was equivalent to the hero himself. After all, the so-called god of steel originally referred to the living god of swords. This way of saying that the sword that was originally made of steel had the appearance of a human and also a soul. Just like the monsters mentioned in many TV dramas, they were originally just animals, plants, or even something else, but they cultivated into a human body. It was the same principle. In other words, the current hero was equivalent to being beaten back to his original state. Although the body turned into the divine sword and fell into a deep slumber, the hero's soul was still in the divine sword. I am the dark goddess in charge of the underworld. Toying with souls is also my domain. That is why I was able to abandon my previous body and become one with you, Athena explained. Right now, I am in a state where only my soul is left. As long as I can fuse with the divine blade and expel the soul of the man sleeping in the divine blade, wouldn't that be enough? Become one with the divine blade? Noah asked in disbelief. Can that kind of thing be done? Of course not, Athena said without hesitation. I am the goddess of the earth, not the god of swords. In the end, I am an existence that is incompatible with the god of swords. How could I possibly possess the body of the god of swords and turn myself into steel? After saying that, Athena suddenly changed her mind. However, I have read your life story from the depths of your heart, and know the existence of the steel in your hands. Hearing this, Noah could not help but lower his head and look at the demon slayer in his hands. The steel in your hands is not a god, but a so-called spirit. Athena's voice slowly sounded in Noah's heart. After knowing about this existence that is similar to steel, I thought that since I could not become the god of swords, then I would turn myself into a sword spirit and become one with the divine sword that saved the world. That way, I would be able to expel the soul of that man. What? Noah was really stunned. You want to become a sword spirit? That's right, Athena said proudly. That man's servant was also the goddess of the earth in the past. Through death, she fell and became the god of swords. I only need to do the same thing. Noah could not wrap his head around it. Become a sword spirit? That kind of thing can be done? Are you doubting my wisdom? Athena seemed to have seen through Noah's thoughts and laughed coldly. Although the time was a little short, during the period of my deep sleep, this concubine has already created a secret technique to transform into a spirit. Relying on this secret technique, this concubine can transform into a so-called spirit. At that time, as long as I successfully assimilate with the divine blade, this concubine will transform into a sword spirit. The success rate is more or less guaranteed. Athena suddenly changed the topic of conversation. Of course, if it's just like this, then there is no way to assimilate the divine sword. You must cut off the connection between the divine sword and that man. Fortunately, you have the sort of spiritual speech that can even cut off divinity. With that sword, it is not a problem to cut off the connection between the divine sword and the hero. Now, I will pass on the knowledge of that man to you. As soon as she finished speaking, a large amount of knowledge flashed in Noah's mind. In India, there were two famous epics that were known as the oldest epics. One of them was called Mahabharata. The other one was called Ramayana. These two epics were the foundation of Indian culture, and had a considerable role in enlightening the development of Indian literature and religion. A large part of Indian mythology was related to the stories recorded in Ramayana and Mahabharata. For example, the main character of Ramayana, Rama, in the box as one of the three supreme gods in Indian mythology, the 10th incarnation of Vishnu, Galgi, once had a dispute with Noah. The main character of Ramayana, Rama, was the 7th incarnation of Vishnu. In the story of Ramayana, it was said that in the human world, there was a powerful demon named Luobona. Luobona ruled a race called Rakshasa. It was a type of evil spirit that specialized in eating human flesh. It was a true demon. Therefore, the leader of this demon race, Luobona, was called the Rakshasa king, the king of demons, and was called the demon king by people. Luobona had the special characteristic of not being hurt by gods and demons other than mortals. Other than humans, other races, be it gods or demons, could not leave a mark on his body. In order to destroy this demon king, the gods of heaven sought the help of Vishnu. Therefore, Vishnu descended from heaven and became a human, reincarnated into a human, and became the king of Bisara, the son of the 10 chariots king, and also the prince of Bisara. This prince was Rama. However, this prince's life was quite bumpy. He suffered from the conspiracy of his stepbrother, and was exiled abroad, wandering for more than 14 years. The only people who accompanied this tragic prince wandering abroad were the prince's wife, Siddhartha, and his brother Rashmana. Later, Rama and the other two wandered to the forest occupied by the Rakshasa race who had committed many evil deeds, and started a battle with the Rakshasa. The brave Rama defeated many Rakshasas one after another. In the end, the demon king of the Rakshasa race, Luobona, appeared. Even the gods were helpless against the demon king, who coveted the beauty of Rama's wife, Siddhartha, and captured her. In order to save his wife, Rama and his brother, Rashmana, embarked on a journey, and rushed to the city where Luobona was. In the process, Rama met a white ape. The white ape's name was Hanuman, and he was the son of the wind god Vayu in Indian mythology. He was also the prototype of the great sage, equal to heaven's son Wukong in the famous Chinese novel, Journey to the West. Rama, who got acquainted with the white ape Hanuman, received the help of the son of the wind god. With the help of his younger brother Rashmana and the white ape Hanuman, who followed him, He finally annihilated the demon king Ravona and took back his wife. He returned to the country of Bazar and became the king. In other words, Rama was a hero born to destroy the demon king, and he was also the king who finally succeeded in destroying the demon king. Therefore, he who appeared in the apocalypse was called the last king. Therefore, the gods of heaven gave him the mission of subjugating all the demon kings on earth. Therefore, the masked wind god who followed him was the ape god who had white body hair and could control storms. Therefore, the subordinate god who helped this brave warrior to bear all the distortions and arrogance of the god of disobedience, and was called the younger brother, was Rashmana. That's right. The brave warrior who destroyed the demon king was called Rama. When the name came out from Noah's mouth in his heart, the stone plate with 10 patterns on the outline suddenly turned and pointed in the direction of the warrior. Clang! A bright golden light flashed in Noah's hand. Chapter 1505. Clang! The dazzling golden light was like the brightest light in the world. It shone on the entire beach and dyed the beach with a golden color. It was extremely beautiful. At this moment, a sword appeared in Noah's hand. It was a sword that was completely golden in color. There were mysterious runes engraved on the sword as a sword inscription. The sword existed only to cut down the god named Rama. The knowledge that flowed in Noah's mind turned into a sword that could cut through the godhead and appeared in Noah's hand. Buzz! At this moment, the Savior Divine Saber that was emitting a platinum light seemed to have sensed something and trembled slightly. It was a reaction that would only occur when it felt threatened. Looking at the Savior Divine Saber that was trembling, Noah subconsciously raised the golden sword in his hand and swung it at the Savior Divine Saber that was emitting a platinum light. Clang! The sword radiance turned into a flash of light, allowing the sword to cut through the space and slash at the Savior Divine Saber. Slash! Accompanied by the sound of flesh tearing, the golden sword slashed at the Savior Divine Saber violently. However, the Savior Divine Saber did not break. Instead, it was as if something had been cut off. The light on the sword suddenly stopped. At this moment, light particles suddenly flashed on Noah's body. The light particles turned into the shape of a white snake. Like a stream of light, it suddenly shot out and instantly disappeared into the Savior Divine Saber. Buzz! Suddenly, the Savior Divine Saber trembled violently like never before. Buzz, 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 buzz. The Savior Divine Saber could not stop trembling, causing a buzzing sound to reverberate in the air. The platinum light that was emitted from the Savior Divine Saber's sword started to flicker, causing the surrounding space to flicker. It was extremely strange. It was only then that Noah seemed to have woken up. He looked at the divine saber that was trembling non-stop and the light on the sword was flickering. His expression suddenly became gloomy. To be honest, Noah was not optimistic about this matter. Although Athena had calculated everything perfectly and even created a secret method to transform herself into an elf in a short period of time, how could it be so easy to assimilate with the blade of salvation? That was a divine blade that could even split a star. Even if Noah used the sword of speech to temporarily cut off the connection between the blade of valor and the blade of valor, Athena's condition was not good. In fact, it was very bad. In that case, even if this plan was feasible, there was no guarantee of success, right? Therefore, Noah was not optimistic about this matter. However, if Noah could think of this, how could Athena, the goddess of wisdom, not think of it? However, under such circumstances, Athena still proposed this plan and told Noah that the success rate of this plan was guaranteed. That was because Noah had neglected one thing. That was, would the blade of valor accept Athena's banishment? If the blade of valor did not want Athena to assimilate with the blade of salvation and become a sword elf, the blade of salvation would naturally resist Athena's assimilation and banish Athena instead. However, if the blade of salvation accepted Athena's assimilation, it would be a different story. Therefore, at a certain moment, the trembling of the blade of salvation suddenly stopped. Clang! The platinum light shone again and illuminated the entire beach. In the light, a series of platinum light particles slowly appeared and gathered to form an illusion. That illusion was the blade of valor. No, it should be Romo. You! Noah could not help but be stunned on the spot. Romo, on the other hand, turned around and looked at Noah. On his face, the fatigue that could be seen at any time in the past had completely disappeared. It was replaced with a trace of relief. After wandering the earth for countless years and fighting for countless years, today is finally the day of the end. With an indescribable expression, Rama gazed at Noah, as if he was filled with emotion and gratitude. He smiled faintly and said these words, "Thank you." After leaving these words behind, Rama's figure gradually dissipated. In the end, he completely disappeared. Looking at the direction where Rama disappeared, Noah finally understood. That's right. The one who was most resistant to the idea that the hero who annihilated the Demon King would be resurrected was not the Demon King like Noah, who was the target of the crusade, nor was it the humans who were dragged into the apocalypse. Instead, it was Rama, who was tired of the constant battles. The person who hoped that the blade of salvation would not be resurrected the most was Rama. Therefore, Rama would not resist Athena's assimilation of the blade of salvation. Instead, he would accept Athena's assimilation with the blade of salvation and be banished. This way, Athena would not have the possibility of failure. It was because of this that Athena thought that the success rate of this plan was guaranteed. The result was just as Athena expected. Quietly looking at the direction where Rama disappeared, Noah could not help but mumble, "Where will he go?" The one who answered this question was none other than Athena. The souls of humans who have lost their bodies will enter the underworld, and the gods will return to the myths. Unknowingly, the divine blade of salvation had completely disappeared. Athena, who had transformed into a 12 or 13 years old girl, swayed her short silver hair as she slowly walked up to Noah's side. She stood side by side with Noah and also looked in the direction where Rama disappeared. Of course, the gods who have lost their bodies have ways to stay on the earth. However, that man will not want to stay on the earth, so he will choose to return to the myths. The god of disobedience was a god who had deviated from the myths and appeared on the earth. Killing such a god would only cause the god to lose his body on the earth and return to the myths. In other words, perhaps one day, the god who had been killed would once again appear on the earth as a disobedient. Including that man, Athena said bluntly. Perhaps one day, that man will once again appear on the earth and carry out his mission of annihilating the Demon King. Who knows? Perhaps? Noah shrugged. When that time comes, if I am still in this world, I will free him again. Oh! Athena turned around and looked at Noah with interest. What if you are not in this world? Then I will let someone else do it. Noah suddenly smiled. The world is so big and its history is so long. There will always be someone who can become the protagonist of this world and solve all the problems. You really dare to say that? Humans are just one of the many races in this world. Whether or not they can survive is still unknown. It is unrealistic for you to dream of someone who can dominate the world. Athena said with a happy expression on her face. However, since the heavenly child who is protected by the world has said so, I will believe in the possibility of humans. Noah could not help but smile as he turned around and looked at Athena. Athena also turned around and looked at Noah. The two of them stood facing each other and looked at each other for a long time without speaking. After a while, Noah spoke softly. You are now a sword spirit, right? After assimilating with the blade of God, I have indeed become a sword spirit. Athena's lips slowly curled up. Now that you have confirmed this, what do you want to say? Isn't that obvious? Noah said without hesitation. Since you are a spirit, then contract with me and become my contracted spirit. This sentence made Athena smile. Haven't you noticed that I have become your authority? Authority? Noah was stunned. That's right. Athena nodded. Although the process was a little complicated, you have indeed defeated Lord Rama. Pandora's great curse has begun to activate, and the authority you have obtained is the blade of the hero. Naturally, I, who have assimilated with the blade of God, have become your authority. Saying so, Athena smiled sweetly. In other words, whether I am willing or not, you only need a thought to contract with me. Furthermore, I can only contract with you. Athena. In the past she was a goddess. Now she had become Noah's contracted spirit. Thus she was born. Chapter 1506. After Rama's return to the mythical world, the wind and fire auras that were constantly increasing in the world also tended to calm down. Sensing that the aura had calmed down, the grand ceremonies that were held together all over the world were also announced to stop. All the forces in the world of magic began to send people to confirm the extent of the damage caused by the appearance of the last king. As a result, although the grand ceremony to calm down the aura was held, there were still a few active volcanoes that erupted, causing quite a disaster. Especially the island country that Rama appeared in. A lot of the aura of the earth was involuntarily extracted by this brave warrior and turned into a land of death. At the same time, there were also many volcanic eruptions that caused some damage. Fortunately, only some buildings were damaged and there were no casualties. It was considered a great fortune in the midst of misfortune. However, this also made many of the higher-ups in the world of magic and spells feel a sense of fear. One should know that Rama had only appeared for a short period of about a day. Moreover, the next day, all the forces in the world worked together to hold a ceremony to calm down the aura, delaying the increase of the fire and wind auras. Even so, such a degree of damage was still caused. One could imagine how much danger Rama would bring to the world if he were to continue living. Thinking of this, the higher-ups of the major forces felt very fortunate. No matter what, this incident was finally over in a way that was daunting but not dangerous. Although the major forces did not participate in the battle against Rama and the other gods of disobedience, the battle against the gods of disobedience was originally the responsibility of the godslayers. As ordinary humans, even magicians who were far beyond the reach of ordinary people could not participate in it. What they could do was to provide some manpower support in the battle between the godslayers and the gods of disobedience, as well as clean up the aftermath of the battle. Therefore, no matter which country it was, the major forces in the world of magic would be busy. At this time, perhaps only the godslayers who were in charge of the battle could be idle. In a room in the hotel, Luo Hao was sitting cross-legged on the bed, meditating while chatting with Noah. In the battle with the masked wind god, Luo Hao did not suffer any injuries. However, in order to defeat the masked wind god, Luo Hao used up a lot of curse power, causing the curse power to be in a state of deficit. This was not surprising. If Luo Hao had used the power of the great strength Vajra divine Kung Fu against the masked wind god to determine the victor, then the curse power consumption would not be so serious. However, the prideful sect leader Luo Hao had chosen to use the power of the Dragon Roar and Tiger Roar grand magic against the masked wind god. That was simply asking for trouble. No matter what, his opponent was the wind god. On the other hand, the great art of Dragon and Tiger's Roar was the power to create storms through ballots. Against a god who could manipulate wind, using wind to fight was naturally not an easy task. In view of this, in the end, even though Luo Hao still obtained victory, it was extremely difficult, causing his curse power to be depleted. Left with no choice, Luo Hao could only stay here for the time being and meditate to recover the lost curse power. Rama. After confirming the true identity of the hero who annihilated the Demon King from Noah, Luo Hao nodded as if she had expected it. It really is that prince. What's wrong? Noah was surprised. You knew it long ago? I only knew it after the battle with the wind god. Luo Hao nodded. In the battle I uncovered the true face of the wind god. After learning that he was the ape god with white body hair, I guessed the identity of the hero. Because Rama liberated the weapons given by the gods in the heaven realm and presented the Manchala, people would naturally associate it with the Indian mythology that had a relationship with the Manchala. In Indian mythology, when the white-haired ape god was mentioned, the first thing that would come to mind was Hanuman, who helped Rama defeat the demon king Ravana in the Ramayana. In a sense, Hanuman's fame was even greater than Rama's. After all, he was the prototype of the protagonist's son Wukong, the great sage equal to heaven in the famous masterpiece Journey to the West in China. For Luo Hao, he was naturally the first god that came to mind. Since the masked wind god was Hanuman, then the lord that Hanuman followed was only Rama, right? Moreover, Rama was the seventh incarnation of Vishnu, who was born to annihilate the demon king. This legend matched up with the hero who annihilated the demon king. In this way, Luo Hao easily guessed that the true identity of the hero was Rama. It was precisely because the exposure of himself meant exposure of his lord that Hanuman did not hesitate to conceal his appearance, not even speaking half a word, and had always pursued the doctrine of mystery. As long as one had some understanding of Indian mythology, it was not difficult to guess the hero's real name after seeing the Manchala and Hanuman's appearance. However, I didn't expect Prince Rama to have the god relic that can resurrect the sword god. Luo Hao said, somewhat annoyed. I've lost my composure for not being able to completely eliminate the enemy. If this were to spread, I'm afraid the people in the martial world would laugh at me, Luo Tsuelian, for being a careless and reckless person. You're overthinking, Noah said, feeling a little speechless. Who would dare to insult you, Luo Hao? Even so, if this were to spread, my reputation as the unparalleled chief of the martial world would still be tarnished. Luo Hao thought about it seriously. Why don't we get to give an order to forbid anyone from mentioning this? Anyone who disobeys will have their tongues cut off as a punishment. Noah could not pretend that he did not hear anything. You're not allowed to give an order like that. Luo Hao frowned. Why? Noah rolled his eyes. Even if I were to tell you the reason, a girl like you who lacks self-awareness might not understand. Since you can't understand, then don't ask so many questions. If I tell you not to do it, then you're not allowed to do it. It sounded like an order. If someone else dared to say that to Luo Hao, they would have to wait for Luo Hao to fly into a rage. However, what Noah said made Luo Hao nod her head obediently. I understand. Since my husband said so, then let's do it. Noah finally understood. Although Luo Hao was a tyrant without a shred of self-awareness, she was not a bad person. Moreover, as a woman from China who had survived 200 years ago, Luo Hao was unexpectedly very traditional. She abided by China's 3 obediences and 4 virtues, and basically followed Noah's lead. Luo Hao would only listen to Noah's words without any reason. Since this matter has been settled, then there is no need for me to continue staying here. Luo Hao got up from the bed and turned her beautiful eyes to Noah. Husband, I'm preparing to return to Mount Lu. Return to Mount Lu? Noah asked. Now, I've recovered most of my lost curse power. I have no problem using God's celerity, Luo Hao said without hesitation. If that's the case, as a married woman, it's not good for me to show my face in public. You're quite open-minded. Noah laughed bitterly and looked straight at Luo Hao. Once you return, perhaps we won't be able to see each other for a while. With Luo Hao's personality, she would not come out after returning to Mount Lu. Then, unless Noah went to Mount Lu to visit Luo Hao in China, it would be very difficult for them to meet again. Moreover, Noah could leave this world at any time. Who knew when the next time they would meet again? Luo Hao did not care about this at all. She was even more straightforward than Noah. A real man should have ambitions everywhere. My husband is a peerless hero, an invincible king. You should travel the world and accomplish great things. There is no need to have any misgivings because of me. With that, Luo Hao stepped forward and straightened Noah's collar. No matter what, this concubine is still a king realm expert, so I naturally understand this principle. Therefore, husband, you don't need to worry about me. This concubine will always wait for husband's grand arrival at Mount Lu. At that time, let this concubine serve you well. After saying that, Luo Hao took half a step back and gave Noah a deep look. Then she turned around and disappeared from where she stood. Seeing this, Noah sighed. I really don't know how to react to this girl. Chapter 1507. After Luo Hao left, Noah returned to his room. Kacha. With the soft sound of the door opening, Noah opened the door of his room and walked in. As soon as he entered the room, Noah was slightly startled. Because, in the room on the table next to the sofa there was a piece of paper. Noah stepped forward, picked up the paper, and read the contents. Since I've done what I need to do, then I have no reason to stay any longer. I'll leave the Holy Grail with you for the time being. If there's a chance, I'll find a way to get it Alexander Gascoigne. Seeing this, Noah understood. Yarek also left. Moreover, he left without a sound. This was quite like that guy's style. Presumably, the guy known as the Black Prince must have felt that this way of leaving was in line with his own aesthetics. However, it was just like what Alice had said. That guy Yarek seemed rational, but in fact he was quite twisted in some places. It's not impossible to have a cool way of leaving, but before that, it's more normal to consider whether it's normal to barge into someone else's room without permission, right? Noah couldn't help but twitch his mouth, crumpling the paper in his hand. Sure enough, that guy seems rational, but in the end he's still a reckless god-slaying demon king. If this sentence was heard by Yarek, he would definitely spare no effort to refute it, right? Unfortunately, in fact, Yarek had neglected the question of whether one could barge into someone else's room without permission. If this was used against him, it would definitely make that guy who thought he was very rational unable to say anything and feel aggrieved. The weakness is surprisingly obvious. Noah sighed. No wonder Alice could resist him. Saying this, Noah casually threw the paper ball in his hand into the trash can with great precision. Then he removed 2 weapons from his back. They were 2 small swords the size of a palm. One was a steel sword that was completely silver. The other was an iron sword that was completely platinum. These 2 small swords were Noah's contracted sprites. This was especially true for the platinum-colored dagger, which Noah had only recently obtained. It was the divine blade that could even cut through stars and was known as the strongest divine blade. That was Noah's elven device, as well as Noah's authority. As for the specifics, Noah had yet to find out what had happened to the blade after it was assimilated by Athena. However, there was no rush. In any case, there would be plenty of time for research in the future. Now, there was another problem that made Noah very vexed. Thinking of this, Noah faintly sighed. He raised the small silver sword, looked at it, and said helplessly, "I say, Aster, you should be appeased by now, right?" While saying that, Noah couldn't help but glance at the back of his left hand. There, Noah's elven mark was imprinted. However, originally on the back of Noah's left hand, there should only be one mark made of crisscrossing swords. But now the crisscrossing sword's mark had shrunk by half. The other half was occupied by another crisscrossing sword's mark. The 2 marks made of crisscrossing swords were placed side by side, occupying the entire back of Noah's left hand. It looked like an elven mark, but in reality it was made up of 2 elven marks. Generally speaking, even if it was an elven user of the same attribute and type, after contracting with an elven user, the elven mark would be more or less different. Moreover, as if it had a territorial consciousness, it would not be branded on the same part of the elven user's body. However, Aster's and Athena's elven marks were not only exactly the same, but they also occupied the back of Noah's left hand. If it was not for the gap between the 2 elven marks, it would look like the same elven mark. The reason why this happened, according to Athena, was probably because of the secret technique to transform into an elf. After all, I used the existence of that sword elf as the basis to create the secret technique to transform into an elf. So, if we really count it, I am now like her sister, right? Because of this, the 2 elven marks were exactly the same, and they occupied the same part of the elven user's body. Of course, there was still a difference between the 2. Although Aster and Athena were both sword elves, Aster was a sword elf of the steel attribute, while Athena was a sword elf of the holy attribute. Originally, Noah thought that Athena, as the former goddess of earth, would be of the earth or darkness attribute. Who knew that she would be of the holy attribute, which was the rarest and most precious of the 5 elements? This was unexpected. However, it should be because Athena had assimilated the blade of salvation. In short, Noah still had to find out how powerful Athena was. Compared to this, Aster's problem was more vexing for Noah. "Aster." Noah tapped the body of the silver dagger in his hand and said in a friendly tone, "It's time for you to talk to me, right?" Ever since he formed a contract with Athena, Aster had not made any moves. Even when Noah called her, the elven girl did not respond to Noah. Noah, who understood Aster, understood. This elven girl was probably angry. Moreover, he was very angry. At this time, Athena's voice sounded in Noah's mind. "It seems that the matter of you forming a contract with me has made this elven girl unhappy." Athena spoke as if it was none of her business. "Although as a subordinate, it's really hard for me to agree with such an attitude towards my master. Dealing with the problems between subordinates is also a way for me to show my master's magnanimity. My dear fated one, how do you intend to deal with the problems between your contracted spirits?" Just as Athena's voice sounded in Noah's mind, Aster, who had been ignoring Noah, finally spoke. "I am the master's only contracted elf. You have nothing to do with it." Aster expressed her dissatisfaction with Noah's second contract. "Master already has me, the strongest sword elf. He doesn't need any elves with unknown abilities." "Oh, how can I pretend that I didn't hear that?" Athena's pride as the former goddess seemed to have been seriously provoked, and she immediately retorted. "Perhaps before I was born you were the strongest sword elf in the elemental world, But now that I was born, only I have the right to be called the strongest. You're just a half-assed elf, Aster said, unwilling to be outdone. In front of the holy sword that can even kill the Demon King, you're just an ordinary existence. Indeed, I haven't been an elf for long. But no matter what, I was born after being assimilated with the divine sword that can even cut stars. Athena seemed to be so angry that she laughed. A mere elf that can kill the Demon King, there's no need to compare. Aster suddenly became silent. However, Noah could feel that the silver dagger in his hand began to tremble slightly. I was the one who formed the contract with the master first. Please leave my master, divine sword elf. At this moment, even the silver dagger in Noah's other hand began to tremble. I have an indelible fate with this man. It's not something that can be compared to a mere first-come, first-served relationship. Even if someone should leave, it should be you, holy sword elf. The silver dagger began to emit a brilliant white light. Master and I have already made a vow to be together for eternity. The silver dagger also began to emit a brilliant white light. I have also made a vow to be with this man. This sentence seemed to have angered Aster. If that's the case, then let's decide who is the one who can accompany the master for life. Athena accepted it without hesitation. Very well, although I am no longer a goddess, I must let you know that my dignity is not to be violated. The conflict between the two contracted elves completely erupted. Chapter 1508. Clang dash. Dazzling silver light and dazzling platinum light appeared in the air at the same time. Within the light, Noah's small silver sword and platinum sword simultaneously disintegrated into light particles and converged into human figures. Then, Aster and Athena simultaneously appeared within the light and landed on the ground, looking at each other. At this moment, there was no expression on the faces of the two girls. They were calm, and it could even be said that they lacked emotion. However, when the two girls looked into each other's eyes, one carried a sense of mystery while the other carried a sense of flirtatiousness. They looked rather charming. However, the oppressive aura emanating from the two girls was rather shocking, telling others just how serious Aster and Athena were. These two girls were actually prepared to fight. This was because the two elven girls used Noah's heart as a platform to converse when they transformed into their sword forms. As a result, even though the conversation between the two of them seemed to be long, it was actually just a split second of communication between their minds. Because of this, Noah didn't even have time to react before the two elves started fighting. This made Noah shocked and he hurriedly spoke. Wait, why did you two suddenly have a conflict? Master, please don't stop me. Aster expressionlessly said. I have to tell this divine sword elf who is Master's true contracted elf. Also don't stop me. Athena also expressionlessly said. No matter what, I was once the queen of the realm of gods and the goddess of war. There is no reason for me to turn a blind eye to someone's provocation and challenge. So you're prepared to fight? The winner has the right to speak? Noah said. Do you have to fight and kill for no reason? Don't worry, Master. Aster was still expressionless. It won't take long. I can deal with this elf immediately. I have never met a life form that dares to boast so shamelessly before the queen of the realm of gods. Athena's pair of flirtatious snake eyes stared closely at Aster. Although I have lost all of my power as the goddess of earth in the past, I have assimilated with the divine blade that saved the world. Now I am the divine blade, and the power of the divine blade is my power. With that, Athena raised her hand. Beep beep beep. Along with the crisp sound of an electric shock, a dazzling electric light flashed in Athena's hand. This is, Noah said in surprise. Lightning of salvation? The true lightning of salvation is the incarnation of the countless weapons that the gods of heaven bestowed upon the heroes who annihilated the Demon King. I am now assimilating with the divine blade, allowing the divine blade that was originally bestowed by the gods of heaven to become independent. Athena said with a calm expression. Thus, the current lightning of salvation is just pure lightning. However, it is still the heavenly lightning transformed from the divine blade, and is more powerful than ordinary lightning. I am not confident that I can control the power of the lightning of salvation. So, Holy Sword Elf, don't die so easily. Before Noah could say anything to stop her, the electric light flashing in Athena's hand turned into a flash of light and shot out. In an instant, it pierced through space and struck Aster. Beep beep beep. The violent lightning immediately covered Aster's petite body. It moved back and forth on her body, constantly striking her with electricity. However, Aster's expression did not change at all in the face of the violent electric shock. She ignored the violent lightning on her body and said softly, "It's useless. It's useless. I have the highest resistance to curses. Even heavenly lightning can't harm me." "Is that so?" Athena looked as if she had expected this. Apparently, she had already guessed this outcome. "If that's the case, then I'll use a little annoying power." Suddenly, the flickering lightning on Athena's hand disappeared and was replaced by a whitish-gold radiance. Wang! Amidst the trembling of space, the platinum light bloomed from Athena's hand and illuminated the entire room. Looking at the dazzling platinum light, Noah was really shocked. The light of salvation? Impressively, it was the light of salvation that could turn the essence of the earth into a blow that could split a star. Athena could even use the light of salvation? In the past, the hero who annihilated the demon king had extracted the essence of the earth more than once, and turned it into a blow that could even split a star. Athena said self-deprecatingly, that was a power that could not be used without the support of the earth's essence. The hero was able to use it freely because he had absorbed the life of his servant girl. As the former goddess of the earth, after I assimilated with the divine blade, I was able to awaken this power and use it freely. This power was formed after taking the life of the goddess of the earth. To me, it's an absolute taboo. Athena's expression finally became a little cold. Therefore, Holy Sword Spirit, surrender to me now and I can still forgive you. Wait until I use this taboo power on you, then I'll really be angry. I won't surrender to you. Aster replied without any explanation. Master only needs me as his contracted sprite. You really don't know what's good for you. Athena snorted. Then let me teach you a little lesson. Just as Athena was about to release the light of salvation that could split a star, Noah finally could not stand it anymore. Stop! The light of salvation that blossomed in Athena's hand suddenly became sluggish. Without Athena's permission, it dimmed and disappeared without a trace. Athena frowned, but there was no other way. Who asked Athena to become Noah's authority? As Noah's authority, Noah's orders were absolute to Athena. Therefore, Athena was Noah's contracted spirit. Only Noah could form a contract with her. Whether she was willing or not, as long as Noah wanted to, he could use her power to form a contract with her. Compared to Athena, Aster, a proper contracted spirit, had more freedom. At that moment, Aster looked at Noah silently and said with an emotionless expression, Master, do you really want to form a contract with this divine blade spirit? Being stared at by Aster's mysterious eyes, Noah could not help but feel a trace of guilt. However, Noah shook his head and squatted in front of Aster. He stroked Aster's head. Apologies, Aster. I know you don't want to see me form a contract with another spirit other than you. But Athena is not only my contracted spirit, but also my authority. Even if we don't form a contract, she can't leave me. Aster fell silent. This young elf had always been emotionless. It was hard for others to know what she was thinking. But Noah knew that Aster was still dissatisfied and was not convinced by him. Why don't we do this? Noah said helplessly. As long as you listen to me obediently, then as long as it is within my power, you can make any request. No matter what it is, I will agree to it and help you achieve it. Can you stop being angry? Hearing this, Aster finally raised his head and stared at Noah. Any request? Any request is fine. Noah nodded. Of course, the prerequisite is that I can do it. How about it? Aster's eyes flickered. He looked at Noah and then at Athena. In the end, he nodded unwillingly. Noah was relieved. Athena glanced at Noah. Using rewards to appease your subordinates. It's not a very clever method, but it's not bad either. It's passable. Noah rolled his eyes. Who was the one who caused this to happen? At this moment, Noah's phone rang. Noah was startled. He took out his phone and picked up the call. After a while, Noah's expression changed. Chapter 1509. Hampstead. It was the location of one of the few high-class residential streets in London, England. In the corner of such a place, there was a mansion similar to an ancient castle. In the mansion, not only was there a vast courtyard, There were also 4 tall buildings and 4 tall towers. It was very luxurious. In Hampstead there were many mansions like this. However, this mansion was undoubtedly the most special one among them. There was no other reason. Because the owner of this building was the daughter of Duke Goding's family, Alice Louise of Navarre. She was commonly known as Princess Alice. The former chairman of Greenwich's Sage Parliament was now a special consultant in this parliament. The reason was very simple. Because Alice was weak and sick, she could not continue to be the chairman of the Sage Parliament and could only retire. But even so, Alice still had the highest position in the Sage Parliament. Even the current chairman would not violate Alice's orders. Because of this, more than a month ago, Alice received Noah's protection. After her body recovered, many of the senior members of the Sage Parliament even advocated for Alice to be the chairman again and preside over the overall situation. It was said that even the current chairman had no objections and said that he would obediently give up the position. From this, it could be seen how high the prestige of this European princess in the Sage Parliament was. Unfortunately, Alice refused this proposal and did not take the position of chairman again. Her reason was like this: I have already sat on the chairman's seat once. Even if I sat on it again, it would not be interesting at all. Of course, the reason to the public became like this: I believe in the ability of the current chairman. I believe that he can continue to lead the Sage Parliament and go on the right path. So please allow me to refuse. Many of the senior members of the Sage Parliament were amazed by Princess Alice's noble conduct. But those who really knew the truth looked at the senior members of the Sage Parliament, who praised Alice as if they were looking at a group of pitiful worms. Especially a certain black prince. After learning about this matter, he made such a declaration with a face of certainty. Compared to sitting on the chairman's seat again, that woman would definitely prefer to be able to see the faces of those who were fooled by her obedient girl mask, because it would be more fun. In fact, that was indeed the case. However, the world is always ignorant. Therefore, the mortals could only be deceived by the princess. However, the princess was not in a good state. Buzz! Suddenly, a thick darkness emerged in front of the door of the mansion, converging into a door-like shadow. Noah walked out from the shadows and arrived at the famous high-class residential area in London. Almost at the same time, a group of servants dressed as maids rushed out from the interior of the mansion and lined up on both sides of the door. The door slowly opened. Then, a woman dressed as a secretary walked out. That was Alice's female officer, Elison. The last time Noah visited here, it was also this trusted aide of Princess Alice who came out to greet him. Elison bowed with a somewhat stiff expression. As expected of the strongest demon king who can even defeat the brave one. It only took a moment for him to come here from the distant Japan. How admirable! Although that was what she said, looking at Elison's stiff expression, she was definitely more in awe than in admiration. To this female officer, no matter how powerful the demon king was, he was still a demon king. The more terrifying the power, the greater the disaster if the demon king was angered. With this thought in mind, Elison was naturally fearful of the power displayed by Noah. And Noah was too lazy to continue dilly-dallying with Elison. That's all I have to say. Take me to Alice. I understand. Elison pushed the glasses on her face and said seriously, "Then please come with me." Noah nodded. Thus, under Elison's lead, Noah stepped into the famous princess mansion for the second time. Gotcha! With the slight sound of the door opening, Noah walked into Alice's room for the second time. Welcome, Sir Noah. In the room, the most beautiful woman in Europe was wearing pajamas and lying on the bed. Her face was sickly pale. She leaned against a pillow and sat up, greeting Noah. This is the second time you've come to my room, but unfortunately, just like the last time, I can't get out of bed to greet you. Please forgive me. Hearing this, Noah couldn't help but smile bitterly. Last time it was still understandable, but this time you're clearly the one who caused this. Who can you blame? There's nothing we can do about it. Alice let out a faint sigh. If I don't release all the protective power in my body, let alone the whole world, I can't even extend my spiritual sense to the whole London. This is the only way. After the appearance of the last king, in order to control the wind and fire aura all over the world and prevent the apocalypse from coming, All the forces in every corner of the world joined hands and held a huge world-class ceremony that had never been done before and would never be done again. In that ceremony, in order to make everyone in the world cooperate with each other and make it possible to hold the ceremony together, Alice used her spiritual sense as a bridge to connect the spirits of all the forces in the world. In order to do this, Alice released all the protective power in her body that was used to restore her health, so the ability of her spiritual sense was greatly enhanced. Finally, she successfully connected the spirits of all the people in the world, making the ceremony a success. After this ceremony was destined to be recorded in history. At that time, Alice would also become a world famous, which, not only limited to Europe, but also the princess of the world. However, the price she had to pay was not small. In order to make the ceremony work, Alice released all the protective power. As a result, the power of the protective power was exhausted, causing the princess who had finally recovered to fall down again, returning to her weak and sickly state. Those blessings were originally enough to protect Alice for several years, allowing her to continue living a healthy life, even if she constantly used her spiritual senses during this period. Now it was all used up in one go. It was conceivable that if there was no protective power, Alice would never be able to extend her spiritual sense to the whole world and connect everyone's spirits. After knowing that Alice had fallen, Noah immediately tore open the magic scroll of the portal and instantly rushed from Japan to London. The person who called Noah was Alice. Noah still felt that he understood Alice's approach. After all, if she didn't do this, then it would be impossible for the world-class ceremony to be successfully established. However, Noah couldn't say that he didn't have any opinions about Alice falling down because of this. "I'll just ignore you like this," Noah murmured. "In this way, maybe I can let you lie at home obediently and not run around outside and cause trouble." Wait, Alice hurriedly begged. "Please don't do this or I'll be bored to death." "Oh," Noah sneered aloud. "What does that have to do with me? Lord Noah, don't tell me you intend to leave me to die?" Alice asked pitifully. "You're such a gentleman, surely you won't leave a weak and sickly lady in the lurch, right?" "The problem is that a weak and sickly person is not a lady, but a wild girl," Noah said angrily. "Who knows if it will be a good thing to cure this person?" After saying that, Noah stepped forward, walked to Alice's bedside and sat down. Looking at Noah, who was sitting on the edge of her bed, Alice's pretty face started to redden bit by bit. The reason why Alice called Noah was that she wanted Noah to give her another protective power. Then there was no need to explain what needed to be done next. Chapter 15:10. In fact, before calling Noah, Alice had been worried about whether she should ask Noah to give her another protection. In addition to etiquette and skills, the careless Alice only had one thing that was most in line with the title of princess. That was, she didn't often have close contact with the opposite sex. As the most outstanding woman in Europe, it wasn't that Alice had never been in contact with the opposite sex in the past, but she had never had close contact with the opposite sex. The reason for this was that in addition to Alice being too noble and elegant, ordinary men couldn't get close to her at all. The most important reason was that this girl was weak and sick, and most of the time she was lying in bed. In this way, what opportunity did she have to have close contact with the opposite sex? Therefore, even if in other aspects Alice was like a child pretending to be an obedient girl, but in terms of interacting with the opposite sex, Alice really had no experience in ambiguous aspects. Therefore, only in the face of the matter between men and women, Alice would show the most appropriate shyness of a girl. If Noah were to bestow a new blessing on him, it would mean that he would need to have intimate contact with Noah. Moreover, it was the most intimate kind of intimate action that only lovers would do. How could this not make Alice distressed? But at the same time, Alice's heart was beating faster. There was no doubt that Noah was the only person of the opposite sex who had the most intimate contact with Alice. In this case, it was naturally impossible not to leave some ripples in Alice's heart. In the end, Alice could only persuade herself with a red face. Anyway, I have already done it once. If I do it again, it doesn't matter, right? With this excuse, Alice persuaded herself. However, when this time really came, a normal girl couldn't help but blush. In this regard, Alice was undoubtedly a normal girl. As a matter of course, Alice's cheeks naturally turned red as her heart raced. Seeing Alice's blushing face, Noah was a little amused. Compared with Alice, Noah's experience with the opposite sex was undoubtedly richer. Back then, Noah was also a pure and innocent young master who would be at a loss when a girl hugged him. Now, although Noah wasn't a veteran, he already had 2 fiancées, and even a self-admitted concubine. He was no longer pure. In addition, this was not the first time he had intimate contact with Alice. Noah calmly reached out his hand and held Alice's waist, holding the future princess of the world into his arms. Wait a minute. Alice couldn't help but cry out. She blushed and lowered her head, her arms supporting Noah's chest. As expected. I still need some time to mentally prepare myself. You're only mentally preparing yourself now? Noah was speechless. Before you called me, you should have been mentally prepared, right? That's that, and this is this. Alice's face turned red as she tried to force logic. No matter what, you can't be anxious. Lord Noah, you need to be patient with a lady. Oh, Noah said with a smile that was not a smile. Then how long should you wait before you're mentally prepared? Alice was speechless. Let me think about it. Hearing this, Noah was really speechless. Mental preparation required time. Even thinking about when to be mentally prepared required time. How much time would it take? When would he be able to protect her? Although it was true that he couldn't be anxious and that he should be patient with a girl, he also needed to be tough when he needed to be tough. Otherwise, it would only make things worse. In this regard, Noah was naturally more experienced than Alice, and he could see it more clearly. Therefore, Noah chanted the spirit of words without any hesitation. I will use these words to provoke the gods in the sky. Exercise this magic, chant this spell, and make everything in the world bow and kneel. Suddenly, in Noah's heart, the stone plate at the center of the cosmic sea suddenly turned and pointed to the incarnation of the priest. Noah directly turned the energy in the energy source in his body into divine power. He let the divine power flow and refined it into the power of protection, which rushed to his throat. When she heard Noah chant the spirit of words, Alice knew what Noah was going to do. She panicked all of a sudden. Wait, Lord Noah. Ignoring Alice's pleas and panic, Noah directly reached out a hand and pinched Alice's chin. With a gentle force, he opened Alice's small mouth. Then, as Alice panicked, he lowered his head and instantly captured Alice's lips. Oh! Alice let out a muffled groan, and her eyes widened to the maximum. In the end, her eyes were completely moist and filled with water vapor. Under such circumstances, Noah directly pried open Alice's teeth and captured the tip of the princess's tongue. Tasting the princess's lips and tongue for the second time, Noah also felt very refreshed. But Noah was not intoxicated by it. While tasting the princess's lips and tongue with enjoyment, he also instilled the refined protection into Alice's body. Oh! Alice once again let out a muffled groan. But this time, Alice's voice did not have the flirtatious feeling of association. Instead, there was only the discomfort of having her whole body filled with a powerful power. It was different from the last time. Last time, Noah's authority had just been obtained and was not mature. Even the curse power in his body was only magic power. Although it was much more powerful than the average godslayer, it was still limited. This time, Noah's authority had already improved a lot, after a long period of battle and self-enhancement. The power that drove the authority was divine power that could make the power of the authority even more powerful. In addition, the divine power was still endless, and the power output had also increased greatly under the strengthening of the sun's sovereignty. Naturally, compared to the last time, the difference could be described as heaven and earth. Therefore, the protection power that was several times or even dozens of times greater than the last time was poured into Alice's body, causing Alice's delicate body to bloom with an unprecedented bright brilliance. Chirp! After an unknown amount of time, the entangled man and woman finally released their lips. Noah and Alice, who was in his arms, looked at each other. One's eyes were unusually gentle, while the other's eyes were moist. Moreover, she was constantly panting, causing the atmosphere to have a touch of pink. Looking at Alice, who was gasping for breath, Noah said with a mocking smile, "How do you feel?" Feel? What does it feel like? The feeling of kissing? Or the feeling of her body being healed? Alice's pretty face became flushed again, but the sickly pallor was gradually fading away. That was the precursor to her recovery. This time the protection I instilled in you should be able to protect you for more than 10 years, even if you keep using your spiritual senses. Noah gently pinched the tip of Alice's nose. Don't mess around anymore, girl. After saying that, Noah did not linger on the warm and fragrant jade in his arms. He gently helped Alice lie down. As soon as Alice lay down, she immediately covered her face with the blanket in an attempt to completely cover her flushed face. Only a pair of eyes were exposed. She stared at Noah for a long time without moving away. Looking at Alice's moist eyes that made one's imagination run wild, Noah's heart could not help but skip a beat. Then, he let out a dry cough and pretended to be calm as he spoke to Alice. By the way, Alice, if you've recovered, please help me tell Erica and Liliana that I plan to leave for another month. Leave for another month? Alice asked hurriedly without caring about her blushing face. Why? I have something to do. Noah spread out his hands. Now Erica, Liliana, Wanlagu, and Huina are all busy helping their respective forces deal with the aftermath. I only had time to inform Wanlagu and Huina. As for Erica and Liliana, I'll leave it to you to help me inform them. Is that so? Alice asked helplessly. Then where is Sir Noah going this time? Why? Are you curious? Noah raised his eyebrows, then suddenly smiled. Then let's give it a try. Although no matter what, it was impossible for Alice to find it. Chapter 15:11. Whoosh! A scorching hot gust of wind surged like a tidal wave, stirring up waves of sand and dust that filled the entire area. In the air, Noah floated in the sand, standing against the wind. His eyes were filled with an indescribable emotion as he looked down. At this moment, what entered Noah's eyes was a black-gray land. That was magma rock. It was a rock formed by the condensation of magma after it cooled down. Based on the time in this world about a month ago, before the magma rock was formed, the entire land should have been covered by a sea of magma. Noah knew this clearly. Because a month ago in this world, Noah was one of the culprits who destroyed the nearby area, causing the underground magma to erupt and drown everything in the sea of magma that flooded the surrounding area. The other culprit was the three-headed demon dragon, Azdakaha. Yes, Noah had returned. He had returned to Boxting's world. In order to resolve the karma between him and the three-headed dragon, Azdakaha. In the world of the Godslayer, Noah had only stayed for about 10 days. However, no matter how long Noah stayed in the other worlds, it would be a month later in this world if he returned to the world he had stayed in the past. After a month's time, the sea of magma caused by the earth-shattering collision between Noah and the three-headed dragon had already cooled down, turning into a black-gray land made of magma rock. A month ago, there was a city called Glowing Flame City on this land. Now, that city had long since been reduced to ashes in the battle between Noah and the three-headed dragon. Not a trace of it was left behind. A month ago, the three-headed dragon that had engaged in an earth-shattering battle with Noah here had also disappeared without a trace. After all, the three-headed dragon could not have stayed here for a month. This oldest demon king had already broken out of his seal. Then he would definitely take action in order to bring despair and fear to Boxting, and then attack the various outer gates. Perhaps, because of the three-headed dragon's appearance, Boxting had already fallen into an abyss of suffering and had completely turned into hell. What's more, even his companions in No Name had been killed by the three-headed dragon. That wasn't something impossible. Thinking of this, Noah's heart became more or less heavy. However, if he left this world and returned, a month would definitely pass in this world. This was a fact that Noah could not change. Therefore, it was useless to be anxious. The most important thing right now was to act quickly. Thinking of this, Noah took a deep breath, and his eyes became sharp. Azdakaha, you'd better not do anything that will make people unhappy, or else. Leaving such a sentence, Noah looked around, and then stopped in one direction. That was the direction of the Realm Gate. I wonder if the Realm Gate was destroyed. Even the glorious Flame City was destroyed, so it was not strange that the Realm Gate was destroyed as well. Noah could only pray that the Realm Gate was not destroyed. That way, Noah could return to the outer door of 210-5380, and return to the base of No Name. In the next moment, Noah's figure directly swept out, turning into a stream of light, and flew towards the location of the realm gate in his memory. Whoosh! In the sharp sound of the air being torn apart, a stream of light cut through the sky like a meteor, flashed across the horizon. As Noah flew forward, his eyes constantly swept the surroundings. Everything that entered his eyes was still the ground formed by black and gray magma. Back then, the collision between Noah and Audiobook had caused a large amount of magma to erupt, forming an ocean that had even surged to the horizon, before finally stopping after being intercepted by a mountain range. One could imagine how wide the area was. At least on the way here, Noah had not seen anything other than the boundless magma ground. At a certain moment, Noah noticed a trace of strangeness on the ground, and suddenly stopped. Then Noah narrowed his eyes slightly, moved his body and shot towards the ground. Roar, 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 roar. A violent roar resounded on the black and gray ground. It was the roar of a few aliens. The aliens had a body that was like a white snake, but also like a lizard. There were 2 heads and their eyes were like red jade, but they revealed a fierceness that was more ferocious than a beast. Impressively, they were the clones of the 3-headed demonic dragon, Audiobook. Moreover, judging from the murderous aura and ferocious aura emanating from these clones, they seemed to be the first-generation clones that were born directly from the blood of the 3-headed demonic dragon. In other words, these double-headed dragons were all at the level of deities. These twin-headed dragons were roaring violently while charging forward like unstoppable chariots. Taking a closer look, in front of these double-headed dragons, there was a figure. No. To be precise, it should be said that there were 2 figures. The owners of the figures, one of them was a monster that was flying forward at an extremely fast speed. The reason why he was called a monster was because he was like a ghost. He did not have legs, nor did he seem to have a body. There was only a light black cloth draped over his body, and his body floated in the air like a ghost. He also held a lantern with a burning flame in his hand, and on his head was a huge pumpkin head that was 10 times the size of a human head. That shape was very similar to the image of a Western jack-o'-lantern. And on the back of such a jack-o'-lantern, there was a girl lying on her stomach. She was a young girl with 2 dark green ponytails, wearing a black and white gothic lowly skirt. She looked to be around 13 or 14 years old. However, the girl's expression was a little pale. Looking at the few aliens that were chasing behind her at an extremely fast speed, she shouted out in fear and annoyance, "Jack, can't you think of a way?" Hearing this, the jack-o'-lantern, who was carrying the girl and flying forward at an extremely fast speed to avoid the pursuit of a few aliens, spat out a heavy and funny voice. "If it's only 1 or 2, I can still think of a way to deal with them. But with this number, although I can't say that there's no way, once I enter the battle, there's no way to take care of you. Aisha, retreat is the priority here for the time being." But, the girl named Aisha said with some unease, "At this speed, we'll be caught up sooner or later. Don't worry, we'll be able to escape back to the camp soon." Jack said comfortingly. In short, Aisha, remember to hold on tight. Leave the rest to me, Jack. The jack-o'-lantern monster made a humorous laugh, but that laugh seemed to be unusually empty in this situation. Roar, 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 roar. It was unknown if they were provoked by Jack's comical laughter, but the eyes of the 2-headed dragons became even more ferocious. They let out even more violent roars and suddenly increased their speed, rushing toward Jack, who was carrying Summer on his back. Under this kind of situation, the distance between the 2 became closer and closer. Jack, Aisha shouted with a pale face. "Almost, they're about to catch up." Tisk. Jack finally couldn't maintain his humorous tone and said angrily, "How troublesome." After saying that, Jack's body suddenly surged with heat, causing the surrounding air to become somewhat distorted. Immediately, a burst of surging flames rose from Jack's body. Bang! The flames that rose with the wind shook the surroundings like an explosion, and in an instant, it covered the double-headed dragons. Roar, 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 roar. The double-headed dragons all let out painful roars, but the fierceness in their eyes didn't decrease, but instead increased. Thus, the double-headed dragons ignored the flames burning their bodies and suddenly rushed out of the flames. "Oh no!" Jack turned pale with fright. "Ah!" Aisha cried out in alarm, and her face became pale. Just as the two-headed dragon was about to pounce on Summer's body, a cold voice suddenly rang out. Scram. Chapter 15:12. Get lost. When such a cold voice resounded in the space, a stream of light suddenly descended from the sky and flashed in front of the two-headed dragons. Dong! Accompanied by a dull explosion, the two-headed dragons were blasted away like rubber balls. They turned into arrows that left the bowstring and slammed into the dark gray ground. They were directly blasted into the ground by a huge force. Roar, roar, roar. The roar of a violent beast echoed in the air. Only then did Wuxia and Jack react. They raised their heads and looked in front of them. Then the two of them saw it. They saw a back figure. A figure was suspended in midair. His robe was fluttering in the wind, and his posture looked unusually free and easy. Seeing this, how could Wuxia and Jack not understand? Someone had come to their rescue. Noah didn't turn around when he felt the gazes from Wuxia and Jack behind him. Instead of turning around, he asked as if he was talking to himself. Are you okay? Hearing Noah's voice, Wuxia and Jack looked at each other. However, before Wuxia and Jack could respond, a furious roar shook the area in front of them. Bang! Amidst the sound of an explosion, the few two-headed dragons that had been blasted into the black-gray ground burst open one after another, leaping out of the deep pits one after another. Roar, roar, roar! The two-headed dragons roared angrily. A pair of blood-red eyes stared at Noah, and violent emotions flashed in their eyes. Seeing this, Wuxia was shocked, while Jack hurriedly spoke. Your Excellency, those are the split bodies of the demonic dragon, and all of them are at the level of the first generation of deities. We have to leave here quickly. It's too dangerous to be entangled with them. However, Noah ignored Jack's advice. He stared at the double-headed dragons, and a sharp glint appeared in his dark and deep eyes. Very well, although they're not the original body, since they're bastards that were born from the blood of the lizard, let me vent a little. It was unknown whether or not they understood Noah's words, but the few double-headed dragons bared their ferocious fangs and suddenly roared. Without hesitation, they shook the ground and jumped up, pouncing in Noah's direction. Be careful! Wuxia and Jack both exclaimed. However, in the next moment the two of them were shocked. Wong! In the midst of a tremor, golden ripples suddenly flashed in the space around Noah, and various relics such as swords, spears, halberds, and so on popped out. Bang, 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 bang. Amidst the continuous sounds that sounded like gunshots, the treasures tore through the atmosphere and shot out like a machine gun, violently shooting toward the double-headed dragons that were attacking them. A few of the double-headed dragons did not even have the time to react before they were hit by the rain of relic. Poochie, poochie, poochie. Amidst the ripping sounds, the twin-headed dragons were bluntly pierced through by the treasures one after another. Moreover, they were sent flying by the force of the treasures. Like kites with their strings cut, they were sent flying. In the end, they were firmly nailed to the ground one after another. Thick blood flowed out from the bodies of the two-headed dragons. When the blood dripped to the ground, it merged with the dark gray ground, and it suddenly wriggled. In the next second, the wriggling ground turned into two-headed dragons that were one size smaller, and their eyes flashed with a bloody light. Noah narrowed his eyes when he saw that. He snorted coldly and raised his hand to pull out a huge sickle from a golden ripple that looked like a water wave beside him. A white mist filled the air on the sickle. It was cold air. It froze the surrounding air into ice particles, and it fell to the ground one after another. Holding the sickle that was filled with white cold air, Noah raised it high and swung it in the direction of the two-headed dragons. Whoosh! Along the path of the sickle, a surging cold wind suddenly blew, and it turned into a white storm. In an instant, it violently attacked the two-headed dragons and shrouded them. When the white storm disappeared, the two-headed dragons had already been frozen into ice cubes, and they were frozen on the spot. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. All kinds of relics such as sabers, swords, spears, and halberds were suddenly shot, and one by one they fell on the ice sculptures. Bang, 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 bang. Amidst a series of explosions, the ice sculptures were directly shattered by the treasures one after another, turning into ice shards that filled the sky and fell to the ground. The whole place suddenly became quiet. The wave-like golden ripples that fluctuated around Noah suddenly shrank and disappeared between heaven and earth. However, the shock in Wuxia and Jack's eyes did not disappear. Looking at the unusually tall figure that was floating in front of them, Wuxia and Jack's hearts were in turmoil. How could the first-generation clone body of a deity be killed so easily? That was at least a 5-digit figure. To be able to kill such a group of god-level existences in an instant, only those who were ranked in the 4 digits could do it. The person in front of them was a 4-digit figure? The way Wuxia and Jack looked at Noah had completely changed. Although there was only a difference of 1 digit between a 4-digit figure and a 5-digit figure, the difference between the two was like heaven and earth. After all, in the box court, people with 6-digit and 7-digit figures were called the lower class, while 5-digit figures were the middle class. Only those with 4-digit figures and above were the upper class. In addition, the gap between the classes was huge, so the difference between a 4-digit figure and a 5-digit figure was imaginable. Of course, there was also a gap between the same number of digits. A god-level existence like the first-generation clone body of the 3-headed dragon was definitely at the top even among the 5-digit figures. In order to defeat such a clone body in the same number of digits, at least 4 or 5 people had to be gathered. If all of them were at the bottom of the 5-digit figures, it was estimated that even if 10 people were gathered, they might not be able to defeat a god-level clone body. From this, one could see how big the gap between the same number of digits was, let alone between the different number of digits. To be able to kill a group of god-level existences so easily, the person in front of them would probably be at the top even among the 4-digit figures, right? Noticing this, how could Wuxia and Jack not change the way they looked at Noah? Of course, in addition to this, there was something else that shocked Jack. Those weapons just now. Jack's voice was a little hoarse. They should at least be bestowed weapons that simulate the godhead level, right? In various myths and legends, the bestowed weapons of the godhead level were famous. Except for a few, the rest were basically unique. In view of this, many people had replicated these godhead weapons. Some of the replicas were incomplete, but some were given a simulated godhead, expanding the spirit to be close to the real thing. For example, the Black Rabbit's Vajra replica was a replica of the Vajra replica. It was given a replica of the Vajra replica, and its power output was maximized. It was extremely close to the real thing. It was because of the existence of such a godhead weapon replica that Jack wanted to say that the bestowed weapons that he caught a glimpse of just now were all bestowed weapons that simulated the godhead level. As for the real thing, Jack did not dare to think about it. Because how could such a thing exist? Noah, who did not know the shock in Jack's heart, slowly landed on the ground, turned his head and looked at Wuxia and Jack. Seeing the two of them staring at him blankly, Noah touched his nose and spoke somewhat tentatively. Are you guys okay? Only then did Wuxia and Jack realize what was going on. Wuxia looked at Noah's slightly handsome face, and recalled the scene where he killed the 2-headed dragon at the god level with just a wave of his hand, and her pretty face turned a little red. Jack, who did not notice the change in Wuxia, introduced himself to Noah. Hello, I'm Jack from Will-O-Wisp. Thank you very much for saving us. Oh. Noah was a little surprised. Chapter 15:13. Will-O-Wisp. Noah had heard of this community before. It was said that it was a community that was established in recent years. Its base was located in the 678900 outer sect of the Northern District of Boxcourt, and it was ranked in the 6 digits. There were 3 reasons why this community was famous. 1. It was said that this community was the strongest community in the Northern District. Its leader was known as the strongest demon in the Northern District. He was a great demon born at the border between life and death. He could freely travel between the realms of life and death, and even had the ability to interfere with the realms. He was one of the best great demons in Boxcourt. 2. Although this community had enough fighting ability, it was not a community of fighters. Instead, it was a community that focused on manufacturing. They specialized in making all kinds of fine handicrafts and gifts. In terms of smelting technology, they were one of the best in the lower levels. They were very famous in the lower levels. 3. This community was dedicated to guiding the souls of the innocent who had lost their lives and saving them. Especially the souls of children who had died prematurely, they would adopt and take care of them. It had the feel of a charity organization. Due to the above 3 reasons, the community known as Will-O-Wisp was quite famous in the lower levels of the 6 and 7-digit society. Even in the 5-digit society, there were quite a few people who had heard of their name. For no name, who could only stay in the lower levels of the 7 digits, such a community was more or less necessary to know. Noah was no exception. Therefore, when he found out that Aisha and Jack were members of Will-O-Wisp, Noah was a little surprised and immediately had a good impression of them. You are the community that specializes in adopting the souls of the innocent children who had lost their lives, right? Noah suddenly smiled. I have been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. I have always wanted to say hello to you if I could meet you. Oh, Jack was a little surprised. Sir, have you heard of our community? Of course. Noah nodded. In the past, in order to adopt a group of innocent children, I established a guild, which is a community. I know how hard it is, so I have always wanted to meet you. So that's how it is. Jack was a little happy. It seems that Sir is also a person who loves children. That's great. It's not love, Noah said awkwardly. I just feel that I can't just sit back and do nothing. I'm being a busybody, right? No. How can this be considered meddling in other people's business? Jack said with a grin. With such noble conduct, even a saint cannot criticize you. If anyone thinks that you are meddling in other people's business, I, Jack, will be the first to not forgive them. Although Jack said this sentence in a relaxed and joking tone, Noah clearly found a trace of determination and resoluteness in it. Obviously, Jack was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Right, let me introduce you to my companion. Jack floated to the side and spoke to the girl beside him. Love Summer. Yes. The girl named Aisha seemed to be frightened. She stood at attention and stuttered to Noah. I'm Will-O-Wisp's Asha Ignofartes. Nice to meet you. Ah. Noah smiled unnaturally. There's no need to be so nervous. Seeing the helpless and bitter smile on Noah's face, Aisha's pretty face actually blushed again. She lowered her head and softly agreed. Jack was a bit confused. Aisha, what's wrong? No, nothing. Aisha blushed and shook her head. I'm fine. Oh? Jack looked at Aisha's blushing face and thought of something. He suddenly snickered. Could it be? Don't laugh like that. Aisha glared at Jack angrily. And don't laugh at me. Good. Jack was like a father who was gratified to see his child grow up. He held the lamp and floated up and down in the air. He seemed to be in a good mood. I'm just a pumpkin. Please don't mind me. Ahahaha. Jack. Aisha's angry and shy voice sounded around him. Seeing the two comrades from Will-O-Wisp suddenly quarreling in front of him, Noah smiled bitterly. He then took a deep breath and became serious. The two of you just now, those were the clones of the three-headed demonic dragon Azidakaha. Since those clones are here, can I assume that the three-headed demonic dragon Azidakaha is also nearby? Noah's words made Aisha and Jack stop talking at the same time. They looked at Noah with astonishment. What? Jack was extremely surprised. Could it be that Your Excellency doesn't know about the three-headed demonic dragon Azidakaha's current situation? The humans breaking out of the seal in the final trial was undoubtedly a disaster for the box court. It was definitely more than enough for such a big matter to spread throughout the entire box court in a month's time. Under these circumstances, it was really surprising that there were still people who didn't know about Azidakaha's situation. My apologies. Due to some reasons, I left the box court and only returned today. Noah looked at Jack very seriously. So, could you please tell me what the current situation is? So it's like that. Jack suddenly understood. Of course, no problem. At this point, Jack's tone changed again. However, it's not very safe here. New clones could appear at any time. Your Excellency, please follow us to the camp first. We'll talk on the way. Camp? Noah was slightly startled. In order to deal with Azidakaha, the rulers of the East, South, and North regions and various communities have gathered here to form an alliance to fight against the oldest demon king. Jack explained. Currently, the rulers and communities have all gathered in a city. That is our camp. Is that so? Noah finally understood. I understand. Then let's talk on the way. Jack nodded with a chuckle. Only Aisha secretly glanced at Noah from time to time. Her pretty face blushed from time to time, looking like a young girl who was in love. Presumably, Noah didn't expect this either, right? A hero saving a beauty was indeed the best way to capture a girl's heart. A month ago, the human's final trial, Azidakaha, broke out of the seal and sunk the entire Blazing Flame City into a sea of lava, completely destroying it. Blazing Flame City was the base of Salamandra. However, Salamandra was blown out of Blazing Flame City by the tornado that Azidakaha casually created when he broke out of the seal. Moreover, before that, Salamandra had already dismissed all the residents of Blazing Flame City. Therefore, miraculously, Azidakaha's escape did not cause a huge casualty in the first place. According to Salamandra, it was because a human named No Name had stood up and blocked Azidakaha that the residents of Salamandra and Blazing Flame City were able to evacuate in time without being hurt. However, that human hero did not come out unscathed in the end. At that time, although Salamandra was blown away and was not in Blazing Flame City, there were many people who witnessed the battle between that human hero and Azidakaha. It was said that the battle between the two caused the sky to fall and the earth to split. It destroyed Blazing Flame City, destroyed the earth, and ignited the underground magma, causing the sea of lava to be born. Everything in the vicinity sank into the magma and was destroyed. In the end, when everything calmed down, that human hero did not appear again. Only Azidakaha, who was seriously injured and whose heart was exposed, flew out of the sea of lava. Therefore everyone thought so. The human hero who blocked the oldest demon king had been sacrificed. Sacrificed? Noah was speechless. Chapter 15:14. During the battle with Azidakaha, Noah was attacked by the resurrected three-headed dragon due to his carelessness. As a result, he was severely injured and fell into the sea of lava. At that time, because it had returned to Noah's hands, the world fragment that Noah had dug out from Azidakaha's body along with his heart had become active. Using the factor of returning to Noah's hands, Noah had triggered the condition to return to the between worlds. Because of this, in the end, Noah did not lose his life in the sea of lava. Instead, he was transported to the world of the God Slayer. In that case, naturally, no one would discover Noah's whereabouts. Naturally, it was not strange to interpret Noah as a sacrifice. However, Noah did not expect that in a month's time, he would become a so-called human hero. Therefore, Noah was really speechless. Seeing Noah's speechless expression, Jack thought that Noah felt that it was a pity and could not help but sigh. I can understand what you're thinking. A human hero who was able to severely injure Azidakaha to the point of exposing the weakness of his heart actually died in a battle with the oldest demon king. It's truly a pity. That's right. Wuxia nodded in agreement. If that hero did not challenge the demon king alone, as long as we work together with the current rulers, we might be able to defeat Azidakaha. It's not impossible to defeat Azidakaha, Noah replied almost reflexively. The real problem is whether we can defeat the human in the final trial. That's the real problem. Jack was puzzled. What does that mean? It means that although Azidakaha is very strong, it is not impossible to find a way to defeat him in the box, Noah said. The problem is that even if we defeat him, he'll be resurrected immediately. If we don't solve the mystery of why the lizard transformed from an evil god in the fire worship sect into a human in the final trial, we won't be able to defeat him at all. In fact, it was precisely because of this that Noah felt troubled. Originally, Noah wanted to continue exploring the riddle of the final trial in other worlds. However, he later realized that it would not work at all. The concept of the final trial only existed in this world. In the other worlds, Noah couldn't find a single clue about the final trial of the human race. Since there was no clue, how could he solve the riddle of the final trial? It was because of this that Noah wanted to return to this world. Only in this way could he hope to solve the riddle. Of course, Wuxia and Jack did not know about this. Therefore, when they heard Noah's words, they looked at each other in dismay. Only then did Noah notice the difference between the two of them. He laughed dryly and changed the topic. Then, after that human hero sacrificed himself, what happened? After that, in order to recover from his injuries, the three-headed dragon Azidakaha did not immediately attack the box court. Instead, he hid deep in the mountains and attempted to recover from his injuries, Jack explained. However, at that time, Salamandra had already spread the news that Azidakaha had broken out of his seal and asked for help from the south and east districts. Therefore, the rulers of the South, East, and East districts all gathered together and called for a community that had the ability to suppress the Demon King to discuss countermeasures. However, if the final trial of the humans was so easy to deal with, then the entire box court would not be so fearful of him. Hence, before they could come up with a countermeasure, Azidakaha, who had fully recovered from his injuries, once again appeared. He slaughtered his way into the nearest outer door and launched a terrorist attack. In order to prevent this tragedy from happening, the rulers of the various districts immediately joined forces with the communities of the various districts to fight Azidakaha. That battle could only be described as tragic. Countless people fell one after another under the three-headed dragon's fangs and claws, completely losing their lives. In the end, even if they joined forces with the rulers of the eastern, southern, and northern regions, as well as the experts of the various large communities, they were still unable to shake the most ancient Demon King. Under Azidakaha's violent attacks, they suffered heavy casualties. Just as everyone was about to face despair and fall under Azidakaha's demonic claws, White Yuksha, who was known as the strongest ruler of the hierarchy, finally stood up. In order to protect the future of the box court from Azidakaha's hands, White Yuksha resolutely used his authority as the organizer. The rulers of the hierarchy all had the authority as the organizer. However, White Yuksha's authority as the organizer had always been prohibited from being used. That was because White Yuksha's authority as the organizer was very special. As the ruler of the laws of heaven and earth in the past and the center of the universe for a long time, White Yuksha's spiritual lattice had been shrinking with the gradual negation of the theory of heaven and earth. His power was only at the level of a sun god, but that was at best a result that could be obtained within the scope of human observation. The spiritual lattice of the theory of heaven and earth existed in a location that could not be found even if all the time in human history was exhausted. It was something that could only be proven after reaching the end of the stars, the end of time, and the end of the universe. Because of this, even if humans were gradually negating the theory of heaven and earth, White Yuksha could still preserve a certain degree of spiritual lattice. Otherwise, if the theory of heaven and earth was completely negated, White Yuksha might not even be able to maintain his existence, let alone his spiritual lattice. And White Yuksha's authority as the organizer was to infinitely expand the spiritual lattice of the theory of heaven and earth at the end of the universe, imprisoning the target in the white night horizon that had no exit. That way, as long as White Yuksha existed there, the imprisoned target would never be able to escape. In other words, White Yuksha was prepared to sacrifice himself and take Azidakaha with him to be sealed at the end of the universe forever. What? Noah was shocked. White Yuksha took Azidakaha and sealed him forever? That should have been the case. Jack laughed bitterly. But it didn't succeed in the end. Azidakaha's strength far exceeded our imaginations, and even White Night King's imaginations. Back then, almost everyone who had participated in the battle and survived had seen an unbelievable scene. The human named Azidakaha had erupted with astonishing willpower before he was sealed in the final trial. The three-headed dragon had a simulated star map, another cosmology, named Avesta. That was the simulated star atlas, another cosmology, that could imitate the target's cosmology, obtain all the properties of the target except for humans and the sect of fire, and superimpose them on oneself. It could also be used as a mirror to offset the power of the imitated target. As for the simulated star map, another cosmology, it could only imitate the cosmology and not the organizer's authority. However, before he was sealed by White Yuksha, Azidakaha had exceeded his limits. He had broken through the limitations of Avesta's simulated star map, another cosmology, and imitated White Yuksha's organizer's authority. As a result, White Yuksha's organizer's authority was cancelled out. Of course, it wasn't all of it. This kind of breakthrough was just a flash in the pan, disappearing in an instant. As a result, Azidakaha's simulated star map, another cosmology, only cancelled out most of the effects of White Yuksha's organizer's authority. He was not sealed to the end of the universe but was sealed underground. Is that so? Noah muttered with mixed feelings. Sealed? Unfortunately, it's not a permanent seal, Jack said solemnly. Because most of the effects have been cancelled out, it's only a matter of time before the demon dragon breaks out of the seal. According to the rulers of the various classes, the demon dragon will reappear in the world in at least a month and at most 3 months. Therefore, the rulers of the various classes have been staying in nearby camps and haven't left. Noah's eyes flickered, and then the corners of his mouth curled up. Very good, that's enough. Chapter 15:15. Perhaps it was because of the approaching storm, or perhaps it was because of the all-out war during this period of time, but the entire sky was shrouded by a thick layer of dark clouds, making it look extremely gloomy. Under such a dark sky, an ancient castle was suspended in the air like a floating island. It seemed to be directly standing on the invisible ground, and was not affected by the strong winds. Looking at the ancient castle that stood in the air, Noah's eyes were more or less stunned, because regarding the ancient castle, Noah was not unfamiliar at all. That was the city of vampires that Letitia used to own. In the past, it used to be the base of the vampires known as the Knights of the Box Court. Later, it was occupied by the Demon King Letitia, and became the capital of the Demon King Dracula. It was feared by the people of the Box Court until Noah liberated the vampire castle not long ago. Looking at the ancient castle, Noah hesitated for a moment, and then asked Jack, who was flying with Aisha on his back, somewhat uncertainly. That is the camp of the East, South, and North regions rulers and the large community alliance? That's right. Jack did not seem to notice Noah's strangeness and nodded. That was originally the property of the Demon King Dracula. A month ago, the human hero who sacrificed himself in the battle with Azidakaha defeated the Demon King in the Game of Grace. The Demon King then became the subordinate of the human hero. Since that human hero sacrificed himself, the subordinate Demon King provided this ancient castle for the people of the 3 regions to use. Our Will-O-Wisp is also currently stationed there. Aisha straightened her chest and said with some pride. Even our leader is there? Your Will-O-Wisp's leader. Noah looked curiously at the ancient castle that was suspended in the air. The rumored strongest demon in the North region. I'm looking forward to meeting him. A demon that would make the community adopt the souls of innocent children. Noah was indeed quite curious. However, this sentence actually caused Aisha and Jack's expressions to become strange. What's wrong? Noah was slightly startled. Is there something inconvenient about your leader? No. Aisha said hesitantly. That's not it. How should I put it? Even Jack seemed to be troubled as he scratched his pumpkin head. Our leader is probably a little different from what you think. Different. Noah was getting more and more confused. However, seeing how Aisha and Jack were stammering as if they didn't know how to describe it, Noah tactfully didn't continue to ask, and instead changed the topic. If that's the case, let's go in. That's true. Jack chuckled. If we let, of the Demon King Dracula said. Of course of the Demon King of the Demon King, of course of the God of the Demon of the world. After all, Azidakaha's another cosmology, could imitate the cosmology of all species other than humans and the gods of the Zoroastrianism, obtain their powers and even cancel out their powers. Under such circumstances, the addition of a human with a 4-digit level of power who would not be imitated by Avesta would be of great help to the alliance that wanted to deal with Azidakaha. Therefore, even Aisha felt a little excited. Noah could naturally understand what Aisha and Jack were thinking, but he didn't say anything. He just smiled faintly, and together with the other 2 members of Will-O-Wisp, flew towards the direction of the ancient castle. When Letitia was still the Demon King and occupied this ancient castle, everything in the ancient castle seemed to have been buried for a long time and had not been seen for a long time. Ancient traces were left everywhere, just like ruins. But now in this ancient castle, there were many fully armed people on the streets, occupying the surrounding buildings one by one. It was very lively, and on the buildings that were obviously occupied by people from different groups, there was a flag that fluttered in the wind. Those flags were naturally the flags of the various communities. These are the communities that came from the East, South, and North regions to provide support. On the way, Jack floated in the direction of the city center while explaining to Noah, who was walking beside him and looking around. Although they are basically all communities with less than a 4-digit number, there are also communities like Will-O-Wisp that are mainly manufacturing, but have strong combat power. Everyone knows that Azidakaha's appearance will bring an unimaginable disaster to the city, especially the middle and lower levels. Even if everyone worked together, they wouldn't be able to resist, so everyone worked together. Jack pointed in the direction of the city center. And over there, the rulers of the East, South, and North regions are stationed. Hearing this, Noah raised his eyes and looked forward. He saw that in the center of the ancient castle, there was a splendid building. That was the throne hall where Letitia used to be. At the top of the throne hall, 3 flags fluttered in the wind. The ruler of the East region, the community where the white Yuksha was Thousand Eyes. The ruler of the North region, the community where Shadora was Salamandra. And the community where the ruler of the South region was Dragon Horn Griffin Lion. The rulers of the East, South, and North regions were all gathered together, letting the flags of their communities flutter at the highest point, showing an indescribable sense of brilliance. Seeing this scene, Noah could finally understand. A flag to a community, how important was it? People could only gather power under a flag. Without a flag, there was no pride to speak of. While Noah was staring at the flags fluttering in the wind, Aisha suddenly said, "Actually, in the throne hall, there is another community stationed there." "There's another community?" Noah's heart skipped a beat, and he also suddenly spoke. "Is that community No Name?" Aisha and Jack were both stunned, their expressions revealing extreme surprise. Seeing Aisha and Jack's reaction, Noah seemed to have gotten the answer, and suddenly smiled. "If that's the case, let's go to the throne hall." Leaving this sentence, Noah walked in the direction of the throne hall. Seeing this, Aisha and Jack finally reacted, and hurriedly followed. Just as Noah was heading to the throne hall, in the vast hall of the throne hall, a round table was placed in the center, and there were many seats on the side. However, there were very few people sitting on the seats, only 4 people. One was a young girl with dark skin, dressed in a dancer-style costume, and a pair of dragon horns on her head. She had the charm of a mature woman. The other was a young girl with a ponytail, with a black hair accessory tying up her pure white hair, wearing a white dress and exquisite silver armor, and wearing a black and white ball mask that covered the upper half of her face. Apart from these 2 young girls, the other 2 were people that even Noah recognized. One was the leader of Salamandra, Shadora. Behind her, Mandora stood there expressionlessly like a guard. The other one was Ran. His face was more or less stiff, as if he was very nervous, but he still insisted on sitting there. Behind Ren, there were several people standing in a row. Surprisingly, they were Zhou Yufei, Hurahibuyao, Heitu, Letitia, and Pest. As for 16 Nights, she was not present. There was a heavy atmosphere in the air. This heavy atmosphere seemed to make Ren's body stiffen even more. Noticing Ren's abnormality, Letitia seemed to be unable to continue watching, and said in a low voice, "Ren, pull yourself together, you are our leader." Hearing this, Ren could not help but bitterly smile. It was because he was the leader that he was nervous. Chapter 15:16. Frankly speaking, in terms of the community's reputation and strength, as the leader of No Name, Ren did not have the qualifications to sit with the other 3 people. After all, other than Ren, the other 3 people sitting here had extraordinary identities. Needless to say, Shadora was the leader of Salamandra, the ruler of the North District. Moreover, the community's base was in the 5 digits, which was much stronger than No Name. The girl dressed as a dancer was the ruler of the South District. The speaker of Dragon Horn Griffin Lion was also in the 5 digits. As for the remaining girl dressed as a knight, her background was even above the other 2. It was mentioned before that in the box. The sun sovereignty that represented the most Asura gods and Buddhas, and had the most important position, was divided into 24. Among them, as the star spirit of the sun, the demon king White Yaksha, who had once represented the heavenly movement theory to dominate all the universes and become the center of all cosmology, only held 14 of them. Meanwhile, of the remaining 10 sun sovereigns, 6 were held by someone who similarly had the deepest connection to the sun. Even though she was a 3-digit number, she was an exceptional existence, able to stand on equal footing with the White Yaksha, someone who was revered as a queen by others. That queen was called the Queen of Halloween. This knight was the favorite of the Queen of Halloween. In other words, this girl was the subordinate of the Queen of Halloween, who was an exceptional existence even among the 3 digits. This time, it was the Queen of Halloween who sent this girl as her representative to participate in the crusade against Azdakaha. Therefore, even the two rulers of the 5-digit ranks did not dare to slight the Queen Knight. Compared to these people, how could no name, who had no flag and no name, and whose base was at the bottom of the box, have the qualifications to sit with them? Therefore Ren felt nervous. Not knowing if it was because she saw Ren's nervousness, the girl dressed as a dancer smiled sweetly. Don't feel restrained, Ren. You have the qualifications to sit here. Sister Sarah is right, Ren. Shadora also showed an innocent and cute smile, but then she became serious again. This castle belongs to a member of your community, and a member of your community sacrificed himself to protect Salamandra and the residents of Blazing Flame City from Aziz Dakaha. Based on this alone, as the leader, you can sit here. Sandora's words made Ren's stiff expression disappear, replaced by a gloomy expression. It wasn't just Ren. Even Jiufei Niao and Kasuga Biao's faces turned dark. Black Rabbit's eyes turned red, and she almost cried. Only Letitia and Pest raised their heads to look at Shadora. Didn't I already say that? Letitia said with certainty. Master is not dead. How could that fellow possibly die? Pest curled her lips. The subordination contract between me and Letitia still exists. This is the best proof. I've said this many times, haven't I? Sarah, the leader of the Southern District, opened her mouth slightly but didn't say anything. Actually, this didn't prove anything. Although Letitia and Pest firmly believed that Noah was still alive if the subordination contract in their bodies still existed, it was also possible that the subordination contract had been transferred to someone else. That wasn't anything strange at all. In the box court, the game of favor was everything. Regardless of whose subordination contract it was, if the subordination contract was used as a wager or prize in the game of favor, the subordination contract would be transferred to the victor. Of course, Noah wouldn't use Letitia and Pest as a wager or prize in the game of favor, and then lose the two girls. But apart from this, there was another method of transferring subordination contracts. That was, when the master belonged to a community, once the master died, the subordination contract might be automatically transferred to the community that the master belonged to, and the master would become the possession of the community. Letitia and Pest might very well be in such a situation. Thus, even if the subordination contract between them still existed, it wouldn't prove anything. Because of this, apart from Letitia and Pest, Joyuasuka, Kasuga Yuri, Black Rabbit and the others all believed that Noah had met with a disaster. Because of this, the already heavy atmosphere in the room became even heavier. Ren had no choice but to pull himself together and become serious. Everyone, thank you very much for allowing me to sit together with you. This is something that my companions fought for me. Thus, I will do my best to make myself useful. Please begin the meeting. Sarah and Shadora both smiled and nodded. Even the Queen Knight raised her head. Then let me first report the current situation to everyone. Sarah looked around. Not long ago, in the battle between us and Az Dakaha, although the Eastern District's hierarchy ultimately sealed the Demon King and brought the battle to an end, there were two repercussions from that battle. One is that because Lord White Yuksha used his authority as the organizer to seal the Demon King, once he leaves the location of the seal will automatically be undone. Thus, he can only stay there and can't discuss countermeasures with us, Sarah said. The other is that in the battle with the Demon King, although we didn't defeat him, we made him bleed a lot and split him into many clones. Those clones have been wreaking havoc nearby. Speaking up to this point, Sarah took out a map and spread it on the table. I've already asked many communities to send people outside to investigate the situation of the Demon Dragon's clones. Now, apart from the area that Will-O-Wisp is in charge of in the North District, the other communities have confirmed the location of the Demon Dragon's clones. Everyone immediately turned their gazes to the map. At this moment, the Queen Knight spoke. Do you plan to destroy these clones? That's right. Sarah immediately nodded. The threat of the Demon Dragon's clones is already very great, especially the first generation, which is at the level of a god. If they are allowed to wreak havoc and divide, perhaps the incident of the East District being attacked by a large number of Demon Dragon's clones will happen again. Everyone suddenly fell into deep thought. 200 years ago, in the battle to seal Az Dakaha, it was because the ruler of the hierarchy at that time did not destroy the clones that split from the three-headed dragon in that battle that caused those clones to spread to every corner of the city and continue to multiply. In the end, it led to the Demon King's alliance using them to attack the East District. forcing White Yaksha to return the divine persona and restore his strength at his peak to face the attack. If it was not White Yaksha, but another ruler of the hierarchy, it would be almost impossible to stop such a two-headed dragon army. In order to prevent the same thing from happening again, Sarah made this suggestion. And this suggestion was immediately echoed by the others. I agree. Ren immediately expressed his position. It's too dangerous to keep those clones. I agree as well. Shadora nodded her head. We can't let the same threat appear again. Although the Queen Knight did not express her position, she tacitly agreed. This made Sarah smile in satisfaction and strike while the iron was hot. Then let's discuss which clones we and the rest of the community should be responsible for annihilating. Everyone naturally had no objections and nodded in agreement. At this moment a person rushed in a panic. Lady Sarah. Not good. This voice caused everyone's hearts to tighten involuntarily. Could it be that Azedakaha broke the seal early? The next moment, what the person said made everyone heave a sigh of relief. Lady Sarah, Lord Griffith of the Two Wings had a conflict with someone at the entrance. Conflict? Sarah was stunned. Yes. The person glanced in the direction of Ran and the others. Moreover, the other party claims to be a member of no name. This time it was Ren and the others who were stunned. Chapter 15-17. It was just like what the person who reported to Sarah and the others said. At the entrance of the throne hall, Noah and the person called Griffith had a conflict. No. It was not right to call him a person. The person called Griffith had a pair of wings on his back. He was clearly not a human being. Moreover, this person brought 2 followers and blocked the entrance of the throne hall. He looked at Noah with a sneer which made Noah frown. Hey! Aisha shouted in indignation. Why are you stopping us? Griffith glanced at Aisha. When he saw Jack, who was carrying Aisha, he spoke in disdain. I was wondering who it was. So it is the little girl from Will-O-Wisp and the clown. This has nothing to do with you. If you know what is good for you, then hurry up and leave. You. An angry expression appeared on Aisha's face. Just as she wanted to say something, she was interrupted by Jack. Ahahaha, perhaps this has nothing to do with us, but does it have anything to do with you, Griffith? Jack held the lamp. His eyes hidden under the pumpkin hole flashed red. Why are you stopping us? Isn't that nonsense? Griffith said as if it was a matter of course. This is the base of the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion. Only the community of the rulers of the hierarchy can enter. You guys, where do you think you are going to stay? What Griffith said was not without reason. If there was no reason, he naturally would not allow people to enter his own base. The problem was that this guy's tone was quite nasty. To be more precise, it should be said that he was quite arrogant. For some reason, Griffith seemed to think that he was superior and did not care to be polite to Noah and the others. Facing such a person, Noah only narrowed his eyes and spoke indifferently. That can't be right. Other than the rulers of the hierarchy, there seems to be another community stationed here. You are talking about that no name? Griffith raised his eyebrows and laughed coldly. That kind of no name that doesn't even have a name or flag. Who would remember it? When he said this, Aisha and Jack's face immediately changed. You. Aisha said somewhat angrily. The member of that community is a human hero who severely injured Azedakaha and saved the lives of all the people in the northern district of Blazing Flames. Is that how you treat the community of human heroes? Human hero? Griffith scoffed. They don't even have wings, and they need the help of grace to fly. Just a random one of them ran out to be cannon fodder, and they can be called heroes? How laughable. What did you say? Aisha was finally angry. Not to mention Aisha, even Jack's eyes, which were hidden under the pumpkin, flashed with a bright red light. Under such circumstances, it was Noah who was the calmest. Then who are you? Hearing this, Griffith's eyes widened, and the disdain on his face became even stronger. At this time, one of Griffith's followers shouted loudly. You don't even know the leader of the Two Wings, Lord Griffith of Handsome Eagle? Where did you come from, you country bumpkin? Handsome Eagle? Noah's gaze turned to Griffith. The so-called Handsome Eagle referred to the high-level life form born from the union of a griffin and a draconic horse. It was known as the third fantasy species, and was the name of the next generation of illusion beasts. In the box, life forms with one race's genes were low-level life forms, and life forms with two or more races' genes were high-level life forms. For example, Luos, who was a demigod born from the bloodline of gods and humans, was a high-level life form. And from a high-level life form, a life form with three or more races' genes was known as the third fantasy species. Griffith was the handsome eagle of the third fantasy species. Moreover, he was the leader of the Two Wings. When the Two Wings community was mentioned, it was necessary to mention the Southern District's hierarchy, the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion. The Dragon Horn Griffin Lion in the Southern District's hierarchy was actually not a community, but an alliance formed by 6 communities. The members of this alliance formed various communities based on their physical characteristics. These communities were the Horn, 2 Wings, 3 Tails, 4 Legs, 5 Claws and 6 Wounds. Among them, the leader of the Horn, Sarah, was the chairman of the Dragon Horn Griffin Lion Alliance. As for Griffith, he was the leader of the 2 Wings, which was second only to the Horn led by Sarah. This made Noah understand why Griffith was so unruly. It was normal for people with noble bloodlines to feel proud of their birth. Griffith was probably such an existence, right? He believed that as a third fantasy species, he was superior to others and was disdainful of ordinary humans. He was the type that looked down on others from the bottom of his heart. This kind of person was not rare among illusion beasts and high-level life forms that believed themselves to be different. As a third fantasy species, Griffith seemed to have this quality, even though it wasn't a quality that deserved compliments. Therefore, Griffith was so vile not because he wanted to find fault, but because he was looking down on others as a matter of course. Understanding this, Noah smiled and said, "Then if I say that I am a member of no name, will you let me in?" "Wah! What?" Griffith's lackeys were stunned. Wuxia and Jack were also surprised. As for Griffith, he frowned slightly, looked at Noah and sneered. "So that's how it is, it's that lowly race in the nameless community again. I have long been unhappy that a mere no name is stationed in the same place as us. If you want to go in, then come and try." After that, Griffith said to his 2 lackeys, "Let's go. You 2 play with him." "Yes." Griffith's 2 lackeys immediately walked towards Noah with a sinister grin on their faces. Seeing this, Wuxia and Jack could no longer sit still. However, before Wuxia and Jack could do anything, Noah glanced at the 2 lackeys walking towards him with a sinister smile, then looked at Griffith, who looked like he was watching a good show, and sighed. "Undoubtedly, you are proud of the fact that you are a superior phantom beast, but instead of being a good phantom beast, you jump out to be a fly. If the so-called superior life forms have nothing to do, then let me see if you are thicker than the humans you look down on." As soon as he finished speaking, Noah looked up and smiled at his 2 stunned followers. Bang! Following a muffled thud, 2 figures suddenly flew past Griffith, who was still looking like he was watching a good show. A strong gust of wind was stirred up as they heavily slammed into the walls on both sides of the door of the throne hall. Griffith's expression froze. On the other hand, Noah still stood in place as if nothing had happened. He opened and closed his fist and looked at Griffith with a spurious smile. "Indeed, your skin is much thicker than that of humans. You only fainted after being embedded in the wall. Presumably, the skin of a third fantasy breed must be thicker, right? Perhaps you can take a few more punches?" Only then did Griffith react. Then, he was infuriated by Noah's contemptuous tone. "Inferior human. How dare you? Don't tell me you want to say that I, an inferior human, dare to attack you, the so-called superior phantom beasts." Noah's understatement blocked Griffith's words. What a boring line, but it can't be said badly. After all, it sounds like something a small character would say. Small character? Me? I'm a small character? Griffith widened his eyes, and a violent anger surged in his eyes. Just as Griffith was about to launch an attack, a delicate voice rang out. "What are you doing?" As the voice sounded, Sarah and the rest walked out of the throne room. Noah turned his gaze and met the eyes of Ran and the rest beside Sarah. Ran and the rest suddenly stopped in their tracks as if they were struck by lightning. They were completely stunned. Chapter 15:18. At this moment, whether it was Jiuasuka, Haruai, Black Rabbit, Ran, or even Letitia and Pest, they were all stunned on the spot. They looked at Noah absent-mindedly and did not react for a long time. Not only the group from No Name, even Shadora and Mandora from Salamandra were stunned on the spot. They did not react at all. Only the Queen Knight, who had never seen Noah before, looked at the group of people who were stunned on the spot. Even Sarah seemed to be puzzled. "What's wrong with you guys?" Sarah's words did not cause any reaction from the group. Everyone was still looking at Noah in a daze. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, even Aisha and Jack felt that something was wrong and looked at each other. As for Noah, he looked at the group from No Name and Salamandra who were stunned on the spot. He rubbed his nose embarrassedly and opened his mouth. "What's wrong? You don't recognize me?" That familiar voice finally caused everyone to wake up. Juyuasuka, Haruai, and Ren's eyes were faintly filled with excitement. Letitia and Pest's eyes lit up. As for Black Rabbit, tears immediately flowed out of her eyes. She did not hesitate to pounce in Noah's direction. "Noah-san." Seeing the Black Rabbit pouncing in his direction, Noah was shocked. He quickly stepped forward, opened his arms, and hugged the Black Rabbit in his arms. In the next moment, an unimaginably soft and elastic feeling acted on Noah's body, causing Noah's heart to ripple slightly. There was no helping it. This rabbit's figure was simply too good. Black Rabbit, who did not know about the ripples in Noah's heart, did not know that she was being taken advantage of. She was crying and laughing as she hugged Noah's neck, jumping up and down continuously. "Noah-san? You didn't die? You really didn't die. Do you really want me to die?" Noah did not know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head. "Well, although it was a little dangerous, at least I survived. If you're not dead, then hurry up and come back." Zhou Yufei couldn't help but step forward and complain to Noah. "You actually disappeared for an entire month. Do you know how hard it was for us this entire month?" "That's right." Haruhibuji nodded his head indignantly. "I was almost killed by that lizard. Being killed is the same for everyone, right?" Noah sighed and patted the back of the Black Rabbit that was hugging him tightly. "No matter what, it's best that everyone is safe." Hearing this, Black Rabbit, Komodo Asuka, and Haruhibuyechi's beautiful faces couldn't help but bloom with beautiful smiles. Only then did Noah turn around and look at Letitia and Pest with a smile on his face. "Thank you for your hard work, Letitia." "Pest. There's no such thing." Letitia gently shook her head. "I've always believed that Master wouldn't die like this." "Humph." Pest let out a soft snort. "Although if you didn't come back soon, when that Demon King broke out of his seal, all of us might have died." Ren nodded. Although he did not say anything, he was also extremely excited. It was only at this moment that the crowd finally reacted. "Hey Jack." Aisha spoke in a somewhat confused manner. "What's the situation now?" "Ahahaha." Jack let out a witty laugh. However, there was a hint of excitement in his voice. "It's nothing. It's just that this Mr. who saved us has an even greater background than we imagined." Sarah looked at Noah with a somewhat astonished expression. "He's that hero from No Name?" "That's right, Sister Sarah." Shadora nodded her head heavily. Her eyes were actually filled with admiration as she looked at Noah. "He's the hero who helped us stop that ancient Demon King. He's the hero who saved everyone in the City of Raging Flames." At the side, the Queen Paladin stared at Noah and fell into silence. Seeing that everyone's attention was drawn away by Noah, Griffith, who was ignored, shouted angrily. "All of you get out of my way. I'm going to tear that lowly monkey apart." Griffith's roar finally reminded everyone of his existence. "What's wrong?" Sarah frowned. "What happened?" Ran and the others turned their gazes to Noah, their eyes filled with questions. Seeing this, Noah curled his lips and said, "It's nothing. It's nothing. I've just been pestered by some blind flies." "Fly?" The anger in Griffith's heart was about to explode. Veins even popped out on his temples, and his entire body trembled. You actually said that I'm a fly? You said that my third fantasy breed is a fly? What? Don't tell me you want to say that you don't look like a fly?" Noah mocked. "Indeed, flies aren't as big as you. Then I'll correct you and call you a big fly for the time being." Noah's sarcasm finally made Griffith's anger completely erupt. "Damn lowly monkey." Amidst the roar, Griffith's body suddenly expanded and slowly changed shape. Beep beep beep. Bolts of lightning flashed from Griffith's body. Griffith twisted and transformed in the lightning and gradually shed his human form, revealing his original form. Not long after, an alien beast appeared in front of everyone. It was a phantom beast whose upper body was a vulture and lower body was a horse, but the horse's body was covered in scales. The winged man image up until now was only forged by Griffith with the gift of humanization. The current half-vulture, half-horse form was the true form of the third fantasy breed eagle. Seeing Griffith reveal his original form, everyone was shocked. "Griffith!" Sarah shouted angrily. "What are you doing? Shut up!" Griffith was so angry that he lost his mind and actually roared at the chairman of the Community Alliance. "This is my business. Mind your own business. You?" An angry expression appeared on Sarah's face. "Damn lowly monkey." Griffith was completely unaware of Noah's true identity and stared at him with a ferocious gaze. "How dare you insult me, a noble third fantasy breed? I'll let you know the power of the second-generation phantom beast born from the union of a griffin and a draconic horse." Seeing that Griffith was about to launch an attack on Noah, Letitia stood in front of Noah without hesitation. Her crimson eyes stared straight ahead, ignoring Jiao So Yao and Black Rabbit for the time being. "You want to attack my master?" Pest didn't stand out and only said disdainfully, "How foolish." As for Noah, he only patted the back of Black Rabbit in his arms and gently pushed it away. He then pressed on Letitia's shoulder, stood out, and looked at Griffith. After sizing up Griffith's half-vulture, half-horse form, Noah sneered. As expected of a bastard. The ferocious gaze in Griffith's eyes froze. Bang! In the next moment, violent lightning surged from Griffith's body. Sarah, who sensed something, cried out in alarm. "Stop!" However, it was already too late to make a sound. With a bang, the half-vulture, half-horse phantom beast, whose entire body was surrounded by lightning, stomped on the ground and charged toward Noah like a bullet. Wherever the half-vulture, half-horse phantom beast passed by, the ground would crack inch by inch under the impact of the strong wind and violent lightning, and even directly shattered into pieces. Such a powerful charge caused everyone present to reveal a shocked expression. Only the Queen Paladin, who had been silently watching Noah, noticed it. Looking at Griffith, who was charging at him with the force of 1,000 caddies, Noah's mouth slowly curled up into an arc. That curl was rather cold. Immediately after, Noah moved. Facing Griffith, who was charging toward him, Noah clenched his fist as if he was slapping his face. He waved his fist toward the vulture head surrounded by lightning. Bang! Amidst a thunderous explosion, Griffith, who was charging forward with great momentum, was suddenly blasted away, smashing into a thick wall. His head drooped down as he completely fainted. Chapter 15:19. The entire place fell silent. Everyone looked at Griffith, who had been sent flying by a punch and smashed into the wall, completely unconscious. For a moment, some people were unable to react. Noah was the only one who slowly retracted his fist as though he had really just swatted a fly. He dusted his hands and said nonchalantly, "Don't worry. Well, the annoying fly has been dealt with. Can I go in now?" Hearing this, everyone finally reacted and looked at each other in dismay. In the end, it was Sarah who smiled bitterly and said this. As expected of the hero who can even force a demon king into a corner. Forced into a corner. Noah laughed self-deprecatingly. If that lizard can't be resurrected, then maybe it can be said that. Comparing Aziz Dakaha with Griffith was really overestimating that half-vulture, half-horse bastard. In the world of the Godslayer, before the battle with Rama, Noah had already met the requirements to level up. He only needed to complete the great feat as long as he defeated Rama, the hero who annihilated the Demon King. This great feat would be completed and Noah would level up. Therefore, before returning to the box, Noah carried out an update on his ability value. The result was naturally a successful level up. Noah Dole LV. 6 Strength, I0 Durability, I0 Dexterity, I0 Agility, I0 Magic, I0 Mystery, C Magic, D Swordsman B Break, B Toughness, I Magic. Weapon Refinement Steel Refining Magic Duplicate, Refine and Forge Weapons Duplicate, Refine and Forge weapons will be weakened to a certain extent according to the level, performance, and ability of the weapon. Duplicate, refine and forge weapons will be maintained for a certain period of time according to the level, performance, and ability of the weapon. Swords protection permanent magic obtain permanent protection according to the attributes of the contracted spirit. Contract spirit as a sword spirit. Obtain the protection of the sword spirit and weaken the physical attack on the body. The degree of weakening will increase or decrease according to the strength and ability of the target. Cold smelting quick attack magic gradually turn the target into steel. Once the tempering is successful, it will shatter into pieces. The tempering speed depends on the strength and ability of the target. Skills. Protection from the world a permanent skill. Equal to luck. Events that were directly related to luck would eventually lead to the most favorable outcome. After rising to LV6, Noah's physical ability has made a qualitative leap. If at LV5, Noah still needed to use strengthening magic to strengthen his body to have a physical ability comparable to 16 knights, then now, even if he did not use strengthening magic to strengthen his body, Noah's physical ability could compete with 16 knights. Under such circumstances, Griffith took a direct hit from Noah and had no chance of getting up. After all, Griffith's strength was at most in the 5 digits. He was not at the top. After taking a solid punch from Noah, how could he still get up? As for the development ability that Noah obtained after rising to LV6, it was naturally the ability Toughness that appeared in the ability value. That was a developmental ability that could only be obtained if one survived a life-threatening injury. The effect of this development ability was to reduce pain and stimulate vitality when suffering a serious injury. This allowed Noah to maintain his best fighting strength no matter how serious the injury was, and would not be affected by it. If Noah already had this development ability in the battle with Aziz Dakaha, the result would definitely be different. After all, when he was seriously injured by Aziz Dakaha, if he had the development ability Toughness, Noah could maintain his best condition and repel the lizard. Then he could use the incarnation of spirit to heal the injury, instead of losing consciousness and directly fainting. In short, compared to a month ago, the current Noah's strength had improved by leaps and bounds. Although it could not be considered a transformation, Noah would not have to suffer as much as last time when he faced Aziz Dakaha again. Therefore, compared to Aziz Dakaha, Griffith could only be considered as a fly. He was not even qualified to be mentioned in the same breath. To Noah, swatting away such a fly was nothing to be surprised about. He believed that if he reversed 16 knights, he should be able to defeat Griffith with one punch, right? Thinking of this, Noah suddenly froze and looked around. Right, where is 16 knights? As soon as these words came out, the faces of the members of No Name froze. It wasn't just the members of No Name. Even Sarah and Shador were dumbfounded. They didn't know what to say. Seeing this, Noah had an ominous premonition in his heart. The pungent smell of medicine filled the space. This was a simple ward. It was obvious that the room had been temporarily vacated. In such a simple ward there was a bed. On the bed, 16 knights was lying there. His eyes were closed and his face was pale as he slept. This guy who had always been arrogant in the past was now in a terrible state. His body was covered in bandages. His hands were filled with intravenous drips. His chest was covered with wires that connected to the surrounding machine-like instruments. Even his lips were dry and cracked. His body had lost a lot of weight. People could not help but sympathize with him. Seeing 16 knights like this, Noah became silent. His fists began to clench little by little. Other than Noah, the rest of the No Name members were all there. Seeing Noah fall into silence and slowly clench his fists, Jiuasuka and Kazuhito did not know what to say. Letitia and Pest also did not say a word. Even Black Rabbit's face was gloomy. The atmosphere in the room became abnormally heavy. In the end, it was Ren who pulled himself together and said this sentence. In the battle with Aziz Dakaha, Mr. 16 Knights was the main force. He directly clashed with the Demon King. Just this sentence alone was enough to explain the situation. Although he was the main force, 16 Knights was not Aziz Dakaha's match at all. Therefore, this insufferably arrogant young man was finally defeated. He was heavily injured and became like this. Originally, Mr. 16 Knight's injuries should have been more serious. He should have been on the brink of death. Fortunately, we have the gift of healing and healed most of Mr. 16 Knight's injuries. Run glanced at Noah secretly. However, although most of his injuries have been healed, Mr. 16 Nights has not woken up. In other words, the danger to his life was temporarily removed. However, no one knew when he would wake up. Noah stared at 16 Nights, who was lying on the bed without any movement. He clenched his fists tighter and tighter. As Noah's emotions surged in his heart, a terrifying aura expanded from his body. The astonishing aura was like a heavy pressure, causing everyone present to feel their shoulders sink. They all revealed expressions of shock. Noah! Mr. Noah? Black Rabbit seemed to be so frightened that he did not dare to speak. Noah! Noah? Juan Asuka and Haruai Biao looked at Noah in shock. Master! Letitia hurriedly called out. Please calm down. That's right. Pest muttered in a somewhat flustered manner. Even if you want to flip out, you should do it outside. Don't do it here. The voices of the girls woke Noah up. He suppressed the surging emotions in his heart and let the astonishing aura slowly disappear. Only then did everyone involuntarily let out a sigh of relief. However, in the next moment, Noah's words caused the hearts of No Names group to rise again. Letitia. Noah suddenly asked. Where is that lizard sealed? Letitia hesitated for a moment but chose to obediently answer. It's not far from here. White Yiksha is also there. He has been guarding the seal. Is that so? Noah nodded. Tell me the place. I'll go and take a look. Letitia was completely hesitant. In the end, she could only nod helplessly. Chapter 15:20. The sky was still gloomy, without a single ray of sunlight, making those who saw it feel depressed. In the distant sky, a stream of light swept past at an extreme speed, cutting through the sky, flying forward at an extremely fast speed. The speed of the stream of light was very fast, almost comparable to a real meteor. Therefore, in the blink of an eye, the stream of light that cut through the sky swept over the outer area and stopped, revealing the full appearance of the inner area. The person who came was naturally Noah. It should be here, right? Noah compared the location provided by Letitia, then lowered his head and looked down. What entered his eyes was a ruin. There was almost no intact building. The air was filled with the smell of smoke, and the ground was also full of craters, as if the ruins had been destroyed by the flames of war. Looking at the ruins, the energy in Noah's energy source was all converted into magic power in an instant, flowing inside his body. In the next moment, Noah's pair of eyes flickered slightly. That was the sign of the activation of enhanced magic. Although Noah had always been using enhanced magic to strengthen his physical ability, the use of this magic was actually very broad. If used on a fan, it could strengthen the wind. If used on a light bulb, it could increase the brightness. If used on a wooden board, it could increase the hardness. If used on a sword, it could become sharp. And if used on the eyes, the vision would be strengthened. At this moment, Noah's vision was almost improved to the level of an eagle's eye, sweeping across the ruins below, and finally stopping at a place. It was a square. A very vast square that looked like it had just been opened up. This square was the only area in the ruins that looked like nothing had happened, and everything was intact as usual. In such an area, a woman with waist-length silvery hair that was as soft as moonlight was sitting cross-legged there. She gave off the illusion that her hair was shining like sunlight. The woman's head was pierced with a bell hairpin, and she was wearing a purple and white kimono. Her appearance was picturesque, but her temperament was quite elegant. From her appearance, this beautiful woman's age was about 20 years old. The person Noah was looking for in his memory only had the appearance of 11 or 12 years old. The two, from the appearance, were obviously not the same person. However, in this box full of Asuras, gods, and Buddhas, what kind of strange power was there? Hiding one's appearance was as simple as it could be. Therefore, although the appearance did not match, Noah could be sure that she was the person he was looking for. Thus, Noah slowly landed on the ground. The silver-haired woman seemed to have noticed something. She opened her eyes and looked in front of her. When she saw Noah standing in front of her, her eyes immediately widened and she exclaimed in shock. You! Noah smiled helplessly when he saw the shocked expression on the man's face. Let me tell you first. You didn't see wrongly, White Yiksha. Yes. The beautiful silver-haired woman in front of him was the sun's astral spirit, White Yaksha. She had returned Yuksha's divine spark and retrieved all her powers as an astral spirit. She was in existence known as the White Night King. You. The shock on White Yuksha's face turned into pleasant surprise. So you didn't die? Just a little. Noah laughed bitterly. Just a little. No matter how much you missed, it's best that you survived. White Yuksha felt joy from the bottom of her heart. You beat that demonic dragon to the point where its heart was exposed, but failed to kill it. I thought you had really lost at the final moment. In fact, I did lose. Noah spread his hands. I lost to the human's final trial. Lost to the human's final trial. White Yuksha seemed to understand the meaning behind Noah's words as she looked at Noah with deep meaning. That is to say, you didn't lose to Azidakaha? Noah smiled without a word. He lowered his head and looked at the ground. His dark eyes flickered slightly. That lizard is now sealed underground, right? That's right. White Yuksha's expression immediately turned complicated. I never expected that even with my authority as the organizer, I was unable to seal it permanently. Azidakaha's ability has indeed exceeded my expectations. If even the famous White Night King says so, then it's right. Noah sighed. From the looks of it, the two of us are in the same boat. We were both killed by that lizard when we thought there was no suspense, as expected of the human's final trial. However, even if it's the human's final trial, it should have come to an end, right? White Yuksha said with an optimistic tone. Since you didn't die, it won't be a big deal even if that demonic dragon breaks out of the seal. These words made Noah raise his eyebrows slightly. You have that much confidence in me? To be able to force the human's final trial into a desperate situation, even if I can't say that I have confidence, I can still increase my chances of winning to the maximum. White Yuksha's tone became a little excited. With you and the people of the Sky Army, we will definitely be able to defeat the human's final trial. Hearing White Yuksha mention the existence, Noah's eyes flickered again. The so-called Sky Army referred to the united community of gods, whose purpose was to suppress the Demon King. The Demon King here did not refer to the kind of Asura gods that had fallen into depravity after abusing the organizer's authority. Instead, it was a true Demon King, a human's final trial like Azidakaha. The human's final trial had the nature of killing gods. The gods that were killed by them would even have their existences wiped out. There was absolutely no way for them to be resurrected. Such an existence would naturally be seen as a great threat by the gods of various mythological systems. For this reason, the gods of various mythological systems formed an alliance and created a community whose purpose was to suppress the Demon King. That was the Sky Army. Every god in this community was in existence that was ranked in the top 3. One could imagine how powerful this community would be. If the community of the Sky Army formed by various gods was really mobilized, the situation would definitely be much better than having a group of 5-digit leaders to fight against the Demon King. If that was the case, it was no wonder that White Yuksha had high hopes for the Sky Army. However, Noah was silent for a while before suddenly speaking. Will the so-called Sky Army really be mobilized? This sentence stunned White Yuksha as expected. You. White Yuksha said with some uncertainty. What do you mean by that? It's just the literal meaning. Noah looked straight at White Yuksha. Will that Sky Army really be mobilized to deal with Fazdakaha? Aren't you asking the obvious? White Yuksha frowned. The Sky Army that is ranked in the top 3 is a community that exists to suppress the oldest Demon King. Now that Azidakaha has appeared, how could they not? Before White Yuksha could finish his sentence, Noah interrupted him. It's been a month since Azidakaha broke out of the seal. It's been a whole month. If the Sky Army was really going to be mobilized, they should have appeared here a long time ago. Why is there no sign of them until now? This. White Yuksha was suddenly stunned and said with some confusion. Perhaps it's because of some unforeseen event. Unforeseen event? Noah pursed his lips. Perhaps that's the reason. But even if there's an unforeseen event, there should be some news about it in a month's time. But so far, none of the existences that are above 3 digits have appeared. Don't you think it's a bit strange? Strange? White Yuksha immediately felt uneasy. You mean, don't you understand? Noah glanced at White Yuksha and said word by word. Then I'll make it clear. No matter what happens, the Sky Army will not be mobilized. Before Bayasha could react, a voice suddenly rang out. He's right. White Night King, the Sky Army will not be mobilized. The sudden voice stunned Noah and White Yaksha. Chapter 1521. Long time no see, White Night King. With such a voice, a figure suddenly appeared in the square with a gust of wind without any warning. I can't remember when was the last time we met, but I didn't expect that we would meet again in such a manner. If possible, I really want to complain to someone. The person who said this was a young girl. She had golden hair like the rice ears on the earth, a pair of deep green gem-like eyes, and a rather petite figure. She looked to be only 13 or 14 years old. The young girl's appearance was rather lovable. If she squeezed out tears, even the most heartless criminal would be soft-hearted. However, it was such a lovable girl who not only carried a heavy steel rod in her hand, but also had an awe-inspiring expression in her eyes. Even her entire body carried a kind of otherworldly temperament, causing people to be unable to help but look askance at her. Noah and White Yaksha both turned their gazes to the young girl. Looking at the young girl carrying the heavy steel rod, for some reason, Noah felt a familiar but very strange feeling. The reason why he said it was familiar was because Noah felt that he seemed to know this young girl. The reason why he said it was strange was because Noah felt that this young girl seemed to be different from what he knew. Under such circumstances, Bayasha let out a cry of surprise. The great sage, heaven's equal Sun Wukong? As soon as he said that, even Noah's eyes widened to their widest point. The great sage, heaven's equal Sun Wukong. Noah was indeed very familiar with this name. Not only was he familiar with it, but in the world of Godslayer, Noah had slain Ape God, who had this name twice and sent him back to the myths. However, it was precisely because of this that Noah felt strange. The great sage, heaven's equal Sun Wukong? How could that monkey be such a cute young girl? Of course, as two completely different worlds, it was not surprising that the great sage, heaven's equal in this world, existed in such an image. However, when the name of the great sage, heaven's equal Sun Wukong, was mentioned, no one in the square would not be surprised. This was because Sun Wukong, the great sage equaling heaven, was the head of the 7 heavens great sage, the first of the 7 great demon kings. 7 heavens great sage. They were referring to the 7 demon kings in the famous mythological story, Journey to the West. Unlike the great sage equaling heaven in the world of the Godslayer, the great sage equaling heaven in this world was neither a monkey monster nor a god. Instead, it was a unique half-star spirit that was born in the center of the earth and transported to the ground through the eruption of an underwater volcano. The so-called half-star spirit in a nutshell referred to the star spirits reserve. They were born with the grace of the planet. In order to protect the land that gave birth to them, they would be given an innate mission. After tens of thousands of years, they would complete their mission and finally awaken as complete star spirits. The great sage, heaven's equal, was such an existence. However, this half-star spirit was separated from the center of the planet due to a change in the Earth's crust. It was washed up to the surface and was born on the peak of the mountain of flowers and fruit. Thus, it was not given the mission of becoming a half-star spirit, and could not be awakened as a complete star spirit. However, even so, the great sage, heaven's equal, was still one of the strongest star spirit candidates. His strength was unquestionable. In terms of pure fighting strength, the great sage, heaven's equal, was not inferior to the main gods of the various god groups. In this way, she was given a 3-digit status in the box court. However, just like what was recorded in Journey to the West, the great sage, heaven's equal, had a falling out with the gods. In ancient times, he had started a fierce battle with many god groups. Before and after that battle, the 6 demon kings recorded in Journey to the West, who agreed with the great sage, heaven's equal's ideals and were willing to fight for him, became sworn brothers with him. They formed an alliance to fight against the heavens together. That alliance was the 7 heavens great sage. The 7 demon kings under the 7 heavens great sage, each called themselves Great Sage. The great sage, heavens equal Sun Wukong. The great sage, heavens equal Bull Demon King. The great sage, Ocean Cover Dragon Demon King. The great sage, Chaotic Heaven Rock Demon King. These were all famous demon kings in Journey to the West. As for the other 3, one was wandering in a foreign land, while the other two died in a great battle with the Jade Emperor and other Taoist gods. Even their souls were suppressed in hell, never to be reincarnated. Even so, the great sage, Heaven's Equal, still teamed up with the remaining 4 demon kings and turned the heavens upside down. They killed their way up to the 3-digit level of the heavens before finally being defeated by Shakyamuni and being imprisoned for 500 years. Later, the great sage, Heaven's Equal, took Xuanzang Sanzang as his master and went to India to seek the true scriptures and convert to Buddhism. This was a legacy that everyone knew. In other words, this seemingly weak girl had once led several demon kings in a fierce battle with many god groups in the upper echelons of the heavens. In the end, she even killed their way up to the 3-digit level, an existence that countless gods feared. How could Noah not be shocked? If Noah was shocked, White Yaksha was even more shocked. Seeing Noah and White Yaksha's extremely shocked expressions, the great sage, Heaven's Equal, scratched his head and complained. "That's why I said, why do you have to send a notorious person like me to carry out such a thankless task?" The great sage, Heaven's Equal's complaint finally made Noah and White Yaksha react. White Yaksha immediately spoke in shock and doubt. "Why are you here?" The one who answered White Yaksha's question was not the great sage, Heaven's Equal, but Noah. "Didn't you hear it just now?" Noah looked at the great sage, Heaven's Equal, with a faint smile. "I'm here to carry out a thankless task." "Task?" The surprise on White Yaksha's face finally faded and he frowned. "What's going on?" Hearing this, the great sage, Heaven's Equal, raised his eyes and looked at White Yaksha with a pair of clear eyes. It was as if he could not see Noah at all as he spoke in an emotionless tone. "White Night King, I'm here to take you back." "Take me back?" White Yaksha was startled at first, but then he understood. Originally, as an existence with more than 3 digits, White Yaksha could not interfere with the order of the lower levels of the box court. However, in order to protect the order of the box court, White Yaksha voluntarily converted to Buddhism and obtained a godhead. He suppressed his original strength and obtained the opportunity to go to the lower levels and become the ruler of the hierarchy. Now White Yaksha had already returned the godhead. Of course, he could not continue to stay here. The great sage, Heaven's Equal, was here to take White Yaksha back. Wait a minute. White Yaksha hurriedly said. "Now is not the time. The humans have not been defeated in the final trial. There's no need for that." The great sage, Heaven's Equal, suddenly said. "The gods of the upper class have decided to abandon the existing human history, destroy this box court world, and build a new box court. Only those with a population of more than 4 digits have the right to move to the new box court. Those with a population of less than 4 digits and lives will be abandoned." The declaration was like a bolt from the blue, leaving White Yaksha completely dumbfounded on the spot. "I see. Is that why the Sky Army hasn't moved?" Noah sneered. "Because they don't want to defeat Azidakaha at all. Instead, they are prepared to use the entire box court as Azidakaha's cage and abandon it altogether." "Impossible." White Yaksha could not help but raise his voice. Then, he stared at the great sage, Heaven's Equal. How can such a thing happen? Faced with White Yaksha's stare, the great sage, Heaven's Equal, announced with an attitude that seemed to be able to strangle all personal feelings. "White Night King, don't take any chances. The lower levels are hopeless. Existences with more than 4 digits have already agreed to abandon the current box court and build a new one. If you want to open up a new world, you need more than half of the sun's sovereignty. Therefore, the upper level has asked me to take you back." This sentence completely shattered White Yaksha's hopes of luck. "Stop joking." Following White Yaksha's angry roar, a terrifying pressure rose from his body and turned into a substantial shock wave. Like a storm, it expanded and instantly spread to the entire square. Pa 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 pa. Under the terrifying pressure, the ground cracked inch by inch and sank down piece by piece, causing the entire world to tremble. Noah's eyes suddenly focused.